I think, just to put it short, it's designed and built for freestyle. It's honestly, it can spin and rotate with no effort. The power to weight ratio is actually more than a 450 from a stock 250. So just purely because of the weight of it, and it rides a lot better than any 250 I have ridden so far as pickup and performance goes. Just on a ramp, obviously, absolutely terrible in a straight line. Can turn on a dime, but it can jump and move, and that's what it's designed for.
Hi everyone, this is a very special episode of the Riders Lounge podcast. This episode is all about the new custom FMX bike design, created entirely by Levi Sherwood in his own mind, using his own hands, and a 3D printer as well, or a few of them. I'm Steve Sommerfeld, the host of the Riders Lounge podcast, and I'm going to let you get a little bit prepared here. This is going to be the most in-depth interview both for this podcast channel ever, but also I think on this bike that Levi has created, and I'm so incredibly stoked that Levi took the time out to talk about his new creation in so much detail. And if you think this sounds a little bit familiar and you've already listened to this podcast before, I want to let you know this is all new. We first caught up with Levi almost 1 year ago to cover just why he retired from freestyle motocross so early. And we definitely did touch on the topics of him building the ultimate FMX bike and also designing the next gen ramp to set the new standard in freestyle motocross competitions. But it's now 1 year on. The bike Levi spoke about last year, well, that's completely redesigned over and above what he filled us in on last time. So this is all new, and this episode is focused specifically on the bike design. And the last time I think that we got this excited about bike changes in freestyle motocross was when Ian and Paul Everest came out with the unit Skycraft over a decade ago to show what could be done with carbon fibre when it was a relatively new product. And if you didn't catch that previous episode with Paul Everest, he talks all about that bike as well. So just scroll back. It should only be about 1 or 2 episodes before this one. So after everything, Levi Sherwood, he has spent the past few years developing and redefining all of the things that he wanted to change on a stock motocross bike and how he could turn this into the machine that he probably wished he had for his entire freestyle motocross career. And something I wish I had during my entire freestyle motocross career was a beer sponsor. And I'm absolutely pumped to work with one of the most progressive beer brands in the world, with Rothaus, who have also innovated the production of creating the best alcohol-free versions of the Tannen Zepfler line of beers. And I'm so happy to work with them to let you know there are just so many better options out there for an alcohol-free beer. I also forgot to say, as this is incredibly in-depth, and we are both looking at images as we were discussing this bike, I will try my hardest to put this audio into a full video so you can actually see parts of the bike that we're talking about as we go through each aspect, part by part, bolt by bolt. If I can make it happen, I will put a link in the show notes to go to recast.app, which is a new sports streaming platform, and you can watch it all there for free. And the cool thing is your views will actually help this podcast out directly. So it's win-win. Now sit back, relax, and listen to the man himself talk about one of the most exciting advances we've seen in freestyle motocross in years. Mate, we're all just trying to work out what the hell you're up to.
Yeah.
You know what you're doing, but I think everybody else is trying to guess where you're going, where you've come from, what the plan is, what the end goal is. It's really, and for me, like, this is really exciting because it's all playing out in front of our eyes. You've been showing us everything you've been doing for a very long time, like since you started building, was it BMXs or mountain bike frames and
BMX
stuff
frames,
like
yeah.
that? Yeah, BMX frames.
Yeah,
like you've you've showed us what you want to do. You've showed us the bike, and it's still very intriguing. And there's a lot of questions around it. So I'm actually really stoked that you wanted to jump on and talk about the bike again. And I didn't think it was that
me
long
too.
ago that we spoke, but it was actually last year. I went back and I tried to find the interview, and it was last year. So actually a lot has happened.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, it has been a long time. I think when we last talked, I was deep into design work with it. Maybe it might have been longer than that, but yeah, she's been a long time coming. It's and yeah, no, I'm pretty stoked to talk to you because then just an easy way to answer everyone's questions and get it out there without having to, go one by one or do whatever, and just have a bit of a convo about it.
Yeah, well, yeah, mate, that's awesome. I'm stoked you wanted to do it and spend a little bit of time on it. I know you've had a hell of a lot of messages. I think there's like 20,000 people have been just on the Instagram picture, just sending messages and carrying on there. So you must have been absolutely overwhelmed when you put those 2 photos up. Was that about 2 months ago?
Yeah, it must have been now. I was yeah, I was. I had planned to. I did want to put it on earlier because it's been finished for a long time, and I've been riding it all year. But I'm still waiting. I actually have the brakes here at home, but just waiting on a couple parts. So I've got custom brakes built for it as well, which kind of just top it all off, and it's just, yeah, real epic. And I did want to wait till that was all done.
Yeah.
And I haven't really seen the end of that coming too soon. So I was like, I'll stuff it. We'll just carry on with it, and I'll put some new photos up when the brakes are done. So that's kind of why it took so long with it. And yeah, it's good to kind of put it out there and see what everyone thinks. And yeah, it's been interesting seeing feedback. There's a lot of good feedback, which is cool. And it's real interesting reading some of the comments and just getting everyone's take on why something might be one way. And a lot of people are very close to certain reasons. And then yeah. So no, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
How many shit comments have you got?
Oh, not too many. I don't know. I probably haven't even read them all, to be honest. I'm quite terrible with that stuff. But yeah, not too many. I
noticed you don't update your Instagram too often.
No, I don't really care for social media, to be honest. So just put on. I mostly just put on bike stuff every now and then.
Yeah. Well, we did talk about it in that first episode. First episode of Talking With You. We were talking about that. We were talking about retirement, the ramp, and everything like that. And that podcast was easily the most listened to podcast I've had. I think everybody's really wanting to know more about what you're up to, what's going through that mind, which I think is awesome. It shows at least there's still a lot of interest out there in development and progression. So well done on that. What do you actually call this bike? Because when we spoke last year, you did say you're already working on this one and it was nearly finished, but you didn't want to say anything at that point. Is this like model 2.0 or 2.13, or is this the 2021 model? I don't know. What are you calling it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. It doesn't really have a name at the moment. It just is what it is. And yeah, it's funny because the bike was built. Obviously, I started building this stuff like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And then about right at the time when I kind of finished competing and broke my ankles is when this design started. And I designed it probably 3 times over since then and just played around with it. And originally I hadn't planned to make it so excessive, like make the whole bike. I kind of planned to just modify the KTM a little bit further than I had. And the biggest thing I wanted to change on the KTM was the fork angle.
Yeah.
And that's what led me to this whole bike. And originally it was like, oh yeah, cool, I'll just make a frame and then I can use like KTM triple clamps and all sorts of stuff. And then, it's like you start one thing, you go this far and you're like, well, I might as well start making bolts for it, down to like the brake levers, the shifters, everything. So I was like, oh, I might as well, even to the degree I made my own sprockets. It doesn't even have it on there now. I designed my own sprocket and put it on there, and that's the only change I made on the bike was I changed the rear gearing by one tooth. So I need to redesign the sprocket. But yeah, I mean, I think I got lost in that question a little bit, but that's kind of how it escalated, I think. Yeah, and then so where it was going, I didn't really have any need to finish it once I stopped competing, but I just obviously loved engineering and still like riding. So it was like, oh, I might as well continue with it, and it was a good little probably a good little thing to show what I can do with my company and on the engineering side of things, because that's where I'd like to go down. Is just originally I started wanting to develop parts and really push that stuff, which I do enjoy, but it's very labor intensive for like minimal reward at the end of the day. So I kind of think I'll end up wouldn't mind just building a custom bike or two every year, whether it might be freestyle bike or motocross bike or road bike, whatever it might be, just do a project bike every year, which is kind of what this bike's taught me. But yeah, if I was still competing, there's probably a few things that I would update on the bike as it is now. Not much at all. Like, I was pretty fortunate when I first started riding it, everything worked very well. Put that down to like just as much like all the R&D I did on my original bike I built, which was pretty awesome. Like, I think, like I said, I changed the rear sprocket tooth once, and actually just the other day I moved the needle clip. So that's the only changes I made on that bike, or even pulled it apart. It's pretty cool, So, but as far as what I would change, it's a chromoly frame right now, and originally I had intended to go down the lines of, say, carbon fibre would be ideal, or titanium, but obviously there's a whole nother project in itself, just purely doing that. So I thought, oh, you know what, I'll just get the bike built, and then if I'm still keen to go further from here, I can. And yeah, that's about it. I kind of also wanted to redesign the engine cases. But yeah, I don't think I will end up going down that far. I think I'll move on to something else before I do that.
You say that. You'll probably go, bugger this, I'm going to do it now. But I was thinking about this chat that we're having now, and I wasn't going to have any questions for you. I wanted to see where we kind of go. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought, actually, I'm going to put a lot of questions to you, but I'm going to shoot them through, and you can smash these out as fast as or as slow as you like. But in my mind, I was like, what you have done, you have built pretty much your own bike. You've started with a KTM, or at least with the engine, and you've built around that. So I thought I'll go to ktm.com and look at what a motorbike website looks like and what they say. And basically, I'm going to start at the top and I want to end at the end. And I think you could pretty much fill in every space with your own custom details that you'd probably forget in the middle. So, righto, this is from ktm.com. Base price, 8,149. I'm in England at the moment, so Great British pounds. Would you put a price on your bike to start with?
Well, there is so I'm building one for a bike collector right now, so there is a price on it. It is non-comparable to any bike, purely just because of the labour involved, and obviously carbon fibre. So yes, there is a price. You probably don't want to know it, let alone ride
it. I really do want to know it, but I understand secrecy.
Maybe I'll tell you offline. Yeah. I mean,
all right.
It is what it is.
Too easy. Perfect. Yeah. That's actually quite a good answer for now. Okay, so I'm going to go through the rest of it. The KTM 250SX is a legend among motocrossers, featuring a high-performance two-stroke engine, a proven state-of-the-art chassis, and top-shelf componentry, and there are a few other machines that come close to a sheer ferocity. Mate, if you had one sentence to say what your bike can do, what would it be?
Okay. what could, one sentence. Well, it's this is
You
very
can think
hard.
about this. We can do this at the end of the episode if you like.
Yeah, I'd have to talk to a marketing person for that. But I think, just to put it short, it's designed and built for freestyle. It's honestly, it can spin and rotate with no effort. It the power to weight ratio is actually more than a 450, and from a stock 250. So just purely because of the weight of it, and so it rides a lot better than any 250 I have ridden so far. As far as pickup and performance goes, just on a ramp, obviously.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible in a straight line. Can turn on a dime, but it can jump and move, and that's what it's designed for.
Yeah, I think you need to talk to somebody in marketing about that. We can talk about that after this episode as well, mate.
I'm not too stressed. I'm not here to,
I
talk them up.
I can do your your writing for the website. All right, so
Great.
just three overall numbers.
Yeah.
What's your overall weight?
Right now, in its unfinished forms, 85 kilos wet. So that's water, oil, fuel.
Yep.
Now, the reason I was hesitant to even post it is because I've still got to assemble the motor I built for it and the brakes. Now, projected weight for that will be 82 kilos wet, maybe a touch less.
Really?
Yeah. So I was actually aiming for 79 kilos.
You think you can drop?
Yeah, it's about 1.2 kilos just in the brakes. And
crap.
the motor I'm using is only a single speed, so, and then all the rest I've changed in it as well. So yeah, which is still just a 250. I had played with 300s before, but this does not need it. It's she goes very good.
She goes good. All right. Yeah. I know you've played with swing arms and the fork, the rake. Yep. So what's your length of the bike?
I could tell you, but I won't.
Oh.
Yeah, I will not tell you that much.
I guess we'll leave the height at that same answer as well then.
Well, the height is, it's actually, I've lowered the suspension surprisingly quite a lot.
Yeah.
But obviously, as you can imagine, as you increase the rake of the fork, it actually increases the height. So to maintain that and little things, I can tell. I think off the top of my head, the shock's been lowered about 20 mil of the stroke, which is actually quite a lot.
Oh, yeah.
That gives you no details that I care to give away, so I'm happy for that. And the fork's about 25 mil. But, anywho, that gives you height, but your seat height's relatively the same, and your length is a lot shorter.
Yeah, that's what I thought when I looked at the pictures. I felt I could see that quite easily, but when you look at pictures, there's always distortions as well. So
that's the goal when you take the photos. I mean, now design bikes, I now understand how the big companies shoot their bikes and put them online, because you can actually, it's pretty rough, but you can actually get a very good gauge on bike detail from photos.
Yeah, right.
So it's quite interesting. Yeah. I spent many hours studying all the other bikes when I was doing this.
That's so funny. Right, so the KTM break it down into 4 different sections. We've got the engine, the frame, the ergonomics, and bodywork and graphics. I'm going to add a 5th one in there at the end of all this, and more, freestyle motocross specific parts. But so engine and exhaust, you said it's a 250cc. You didn't go the 300 like you've been playing with?
Yep. Yeah. So just 250cc. Obviously, everything's just fine-tuned a little bit from there. Not too much, to be honest. And then the exhaust is all custom built. Now the detail of the exhaust is actually near exact a stock KTM 250 SX. The muffler is a certain length that I've learned that I like over the years.
Okay.
I prefer, they're not dead stock, because stock ones are huge, but,
Yeah, they look like bazookas hanging out the back.
Yeah, wheelie bars, eh? So, yeah, I prefer, like, over the years, I've always used the Pro Circuit 304, not the Shorty. A lot of people go for the Shorty, but KTMs don't really have the over rev like the jet bike, so I prefer a longer muffler. But anyway, so that's about the only change I made, which I kind of incorporated in the muffler. And to design the the expansion chamber. Expansion chamber was probably one of the hardest things for me to design and also understand. And anyone like I'm pretty green with the expansion chambers, but I understand this stuff, obviously the basics. But anyone that really knows their stuff and that will sit there and tell you it's not an easy job. So that's why I just pretty much copied the 250 two-stroke and went from there. I actually really like the new. I used to always use the Pro Circuits, but the 2020 onwards stock expansion chamber works really well, so I prefer that. Now to do that, I 3D scanned it all, put it in the computer, and then essentially spliced it every 20 millimeters and took the diameter and obviously worked out volume and whatnot, straightened it all out. I could show you on the computer. This took me a long time, and then rerouted it through where I wanted to go. And I can't remember how long this took me, but it took me so many times because you're working it out and you're doing all these bends and whatnot, and you get to a point you're like, oh shoot, I'm about 20 mil too long or something. I need to go back and change the routing. So that was quite the experience. And then obviously I had to kind of learn about press and I don't even really know what they're called, like press and die forms, to actually form the material. So I had originally planned to do a cone pipe, which I'd drawn all out and designed, and that was all cool. And I got about 3/4 of the way through the first one, and I was about 3 days into building. I was like, this is not sustainable. If I dent or break this pipe, I'm not going to be a happy man. So I was like, I'll stuff it. And I just, I had all the dies and forms made to press it out, which makes it a little bit more faster, a little bit more enjoyable, but obviously a lot more expensive.
Just going back one step there, when you said you did all this with the 3D scanner and then you were testing where it was going to reroute through the bike, are you talking about testing on the computer in 3D CAD, or did you mean testing as in you made pipes and then went,
that's all on CAD. Yeah,
that was all on CAD. So you were testing everything in CAD.
Yep. So the whole bike was built, designed, and and all done on CAD beforehand. It was actually the first thing I've ever drawn in CAD, to be honest. So it's quite funny.
Hey, learning on the job.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started like when I first. I had played around with odds and ends, but you build a ramp or something on CAD. That's pretty basic stuff.
Yeah.
But I started with what I did to kind of really get a grip for the software was I got the wheels, suspension, the components I was going to use, and drew them from scratch and whatnot, and then by the time I'd kind of done those few little projects, I obviously learned the basics to be able to step into drawing it. And then I drew the bike about 3 times over start to finish. But then the final time I was like, I think I'm about right here. We're good to go. So, yeah.
Well, while we're on the exhaust, we do have the shape is completely different, so you can talk about that in a second. But Squibby did send through a voice message. I'll just play it now if you would like to answer this question.
With regards to Levi's bike, one of my first thoughts was when I saw the exhaust system, and I wondered about how the power characteristics were, because obviously that exhaust pipe, the shape and the route that it takes is massively different, or visually appears massively different to a standard header pipe. So I wondered what the performance characteristics were like with the exhaust system taking the route that it does.
Yeah.
Good question. Now, it actually performs the same. It's very hard to say. I haven't dynoed it, but I probably will once I get the final motor in. So it'll be quite interesting to see. But the bike rides better. Now, I'm not sure if it's just because it's 20 kilos lighter, or because of maybe the exhaust runs a little bit better. It just gets up and goes. And then also the expansion chamber is made from stainless steel, which obviously will perform slightly different to the mild steel. To that degree, I couldn't tell you what's going on. But yeah, no, as far as I'm concerned, it probably performs about the same. The route and the shape, the shape of it is all similar, but the routing is obviously different, and the routing doesn't really affect it. So the whole purpose for the routing was to centralize the mass. That's the main purpose of the bike. And the the cool thing about that, one of my favorite bikes and designer was a guy, Horst Leitner. I may be pronouncing his name incorrectly, so hopefully I'm not. But he built a bike for KTM. I'll Google it and I'll send you a link so you can have a look at it, or maybe look it up. Horst Leitner, KTM 125. I think he done it like early 90s, maybe 89, 91 or something. And his 125 had a similar exhaust routing, so obviously that's what sparked my idea. His muffler actually came down behind the motor and the swinger, and between the swinger, which was pretty awesome, pretty cool stuff. But it worked out. There's not a chance it would work on this bike, and that's how I got this layout. What sparked the original idea for it. I don't know if it sparked that idea. I remember looking at that bike years ago, truly admiring it. I just really love the whole design of it, and his obviously his thoughts behind it. Probably not that I know them, but if you look at them and you kind of understand what they may have been trying to achieve. Anywho, so that's how the exhaust shape kind of came around. I think I must have seen that back in the day, thinking, man, that'd be an epic freestyle exhaust, just because of the weight centralisation, and that's probably how it come about. And yeah, just fit in everything else around it. Or just honestly, there's a lot of time trying to just mash it all together. It's pretty tight in there, but it all works very well.
Yeah, right. So if somebody is listening to this podcast that is audio only, and if they have not seen a picture of your bike, which I'd be very surprised at this point they haven't, can you just explain very quickly what that route looks like?
Yeah, okay. So where's she going? I've got the design in front of me, so we can kind of talk it through. It's it essentially comes out the port generally and goes to the right, which most bikes are actually going to the left. At the bottom side, it kind of looks somewhat normal, but then it goes vertically up through where the radiator would be, and then dumps down back on the right side, just behind your calf muscle. So. The idea behind all that.
So it's coming out the engine, twists to the right instead of the regular left. It then goes down and then back up through the left-hand radiator, which is now removed.
Yeah.
And then from there, I guess it starts to go into that small part of the expansion chamber again. And
that's right,
fitting into the silencer coming out. But yeah, like you said, near your right calf, like where
and I guess
where kind of your shock is, isn't it?
Correct, yeah. So it actually runs where people would expect a gas tank. Runs parallel with the frame rails and the shock. Obviously, when I was designing it, I obviously wanted it to be aesthetically pleasing. That was second to the function, but so everything had to be nice and all the lines had to be correct, So that is part of that, and it dumps out just behind your foot. Also, part of the design layout, which I forgot to mention, was on my previous bike, I only had one radiator, and the expansion chamber, the radiator, and the exhaust was all on one side of the bike. Now, that it's something that you don't think much of, but it actually is unbalanced left to right. So when I would go to whip it left or right, it would dip one way faster than the other. And I just didn't like it. Obviously, I got used to it in the end, but then this bike is very well balanced left to right. Because your radiator's one side, the muffler weighs next to nothing, and the expansion chamber goes up the other side with the steering stabiliser to offset that radiator weight as well. So there's just another one of the thoughts behind that.
I didn't even think of the left and right balance. That's something
you'd be surprised how much it affects it.
Yeah, I can tell. You know when you're jumping and you get like a little bit of a kick, like left or right, and you're like, what the hell's wrong? And you look back at your the stocks for the axle, and you're like,
Yep.
oh, it's moved in like 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters, and that can throw. If your rear wheel's just pointing 1 millimeter in the wrong direction, you can feel it. So
Yeah. I had a
probably
bike back
surprised
in
me.
the day when we were doing flares, when that was quite the thing. And it just never jumped straight no matter what I did. Like, I just couldn't get it. And the bike had done 40 or 50 hours, or I'm not sure, pretty close to it. But it had done a lot of flares in it. And what I worked out was actually the frame had twisted from those landings.
Ah,
And then, I couldn't jump or flip it straight. It was just my practice bike, but it just, it done my head in. Eventually working out the frame was bent. So, not bent,
how did you
but
work that out?
put a new one in and jump straight. Um,
Okay, fair enough. Easy.
but I can 3D scan all the stuff and understand it. So I actually, the bike that I scanned for this, one of the frames I scanned, I've done a couple actually because of this, was the bike I crashed when I broke my ankle. And this bike, I worked out, I think we'd get off that next gen ramp about 11 meters high, maybe 10 and a half or so. And it had landed that far down onto the top of the landing. So let's say 4 meters, dropped to 4 meters. So it would, what's that, 6 odd meter fall, and it landed straight to its handlebars. And I noticed it snapped the engine mount. I was like, oh, that's odd. Obviously, like the frame's pulled out, And I scanned it, and sure enough, like you can just see that. Now, to what degree is the frame twisted, from welding it in the original state? Probably not as much as this was, but so you'd be very surprised how much the frames move and talk around throughout, from motocross or freestyle or whatever. So yeah, they fatigue over time. So after that bike, I never really rode or hung onto one for more than 25 hours or something like that. But to be fair, now we ride airbags. It's probably not really an issue. I mean, you're still if you're still doing it old school, then yeah. But that kind of stuff made a big difference for me. But I mean, we ride freestyle, so you just jump one identical jump for the most part over and over and over, so you can just feel just crazy little things,
Yeah, things that you would never feel any other day.
That's right.
All right, so that's the engine and the exhaust. Gearbox, 5 gears. I thought I heard you say single speed before. I assume
So
1 gear.
Yeah, the motor that's built for it, it's all done actually. I just need to assemble it. But you know how projects go, when you get 95% of the way, you just let it sit for a bit. It's single speed, 250, all titanium components. I've had a few things, 3D printed titanium, a few things remachined titanium, and just pretty basic, really. Just make the thing a lot lighter.
How much did that drop the weight by removing 4 gears?
Shoot, I can tell you, I've got a jar of stuff that we've removed. Also, we had to machine a couple off. But I think,
even just
I think the gears alone, it's about. I'm pretty sure it's over a kilo, and then the rest of the weight is from the titanium stuff, which is saved. But the gearbox is interesting. I've done so forever. I had either 3 speeds or 2 speeds when I was competing, and they were cool, man. They just pick up like 0 to nothing or to whatever you want instantly, because there's less drag on the motor.
Yeah.
So there's no more power, but there's less power lost in the driveline.
Yes, correct.
And then obviously you have the added lost words. Also, the other good thing is you got less centrifugal weight force from the rotating mass, which means the bike can just move around as it pleases. So, which is the first reason I ride a 2-stroke, is 4-strokes are heavy and dull. They're overpowered for what they need to be. So you're just carrying stuff you don't need. For freestyle, we're talking. Great bikes otherwise. But for freestyle. So purely by not having your valves, your cam, your cam chain, whatever, all of that stuff, you're now you can now move a lot freer. So now when you take out a few gears in the gearbox, that obviously adds to that. Even like lighter clutch baskets and all of that stuff. So that's it. That's when I say the motor's built, it's kind of just random stuff like that. But that makes a huge difference. But it has the counter effect for certain tricks. So some tricks, like the best whip guys, be interesting to see the boys ride this bike because they may love it or they may hate it. Because a lot of like whipping is used by the inertia of your rear wheel in your motor, just feeding it. So you'll find you've got excellent flick on this, but you're not going to have the extra delivery from the wheel speed and the inertia.
Yeah, like one thing I noticed, I did have 4-stroke there when at the very, very start. That was when I was so fresh. I didn't even know what the hell I was doing anyway. I was just learning. But I remember I basically destroyed one of my KTM 252 strokes. I rebuilt it enough and I said, right, I'm just going to sell this one and then wait for the next year's model. And that was about a 3-month wait. And I had Sheeny's bike at my house in Brisbane, and I just asked him, right, I'm trying to sell you a bike, but for the next 3 months, can I just ride your old Honda 450? He's like, yeah, just go for it, and if someone buys it, just sell it. Sweet. When I rode his 450, the craziest thing was I could finally do the first actual whips I'd ever done. When I was on a 2-stroke, like I would try and whip, and I was just doing bum whips, and they were crap. But then the first day I felt a whip just peel straight out of the ramp. I'm like, oh, and it's like I was a passenger on that first whip. I just went where the bike went. And that taught me more in 3 months riding that 450 about how to whip. And then when I got back on the 2-stroke, I brought what I learned across, but actually I found it a little bit harder. So then I'd have to really work on seat bouncing and trying to get under it and all that sort of stuff. So I think what you're saying there makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it could go one way or it could go the other on whips.
Yep. And just another thing that comes to mind while you're saying that is, now I haven't really spent a lot of time on jet bikes, but the over rev from the 4-strokes or the extra power obviously left over, because 250 you're actually using most of it that it's got in second gear, but 450s you're not really. That in itself is enough to keep that front wheel up and then to be able to crank it back down is one thing I had noticed over the years. There are a lot of guys will have different opinions on that, I'm sure, but one thing it took me a long time to work is just getting enough over rev, without taking away the bottom end. Yeah. And then as soon as you get that extra little bit of wheel speed, or I think the key is to kind of come off the tip of the ramp with about 75% of your power rather than 100%. Because by the time you get to 100%, it's always already falling over and kind of dropping the front. Maybe that's got something to do with it.
You're losing what you want. Which is power on demand, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's one thing I've actually learned in the last couple of years is the differences between the bikes and the power delivery. Now, 4-strokes I can't really speak for, but just talking to the boys that ride the Yamahas versus KTM, talking about double flips or whips or whatever it is, I realised how much it affects it and how different it is. So, like everyone probably hears me harp on how I think KTM is the best freestyle bike by far, which I truly believe. Like, I mean, if I hadn't have been sponsored by them for all those years, I would have bought them otherwise, And the reason I'm saying this is just the way that the bottom end is on the 2-stroke. It just fits freestyle, that initial snap and torque. Now, where the Yamaha has less bottom end but a lot of over rev. And I started to learn this when I was talking to Cam Sinclair about double flips. And his approach, which worked like really good for him and a Yamaha, was come in quite fast and then just have it into, the top range of the power and then just blip it off the top. Whereas I would try that on a KTM and I'd get nowhere at all, and I would have to try coming as slow as I could and just open it up right on the ramp, and then essentially it would just do it for me. And just working that. And then I remember talking to Tucker a few years back when he was learning, and I was trying to walk him through the technique I used, and then realised that did not work.
He
And
couldn't
then
do what you're saying.
Yeah. And then I think I linked him up with Cam or told him Cam's way or whatever, and it worked perfectly for him. So to me, that's just talking about like that. I understand the power delivery, and the difference between doing tricks is so different per bike. Anyway, just it's kind of relevant to nothing right now, but it's an observation I've made over the years.
It is. It's really interesting actually to hear that, because something might seem so impossible, but it could be their machinery is the bit that's holding them back, or they can do something and they're wondering why their buddy they're riding with can't do it. Like it does make sense. All right, so we'll move on. Carburettor, stock or something different?
Yeah, no, she's dead stock.
Dead stock.
Obviously just
So the Mikuni or the old
the
Kian?
Mikuni, yeah. So I love the Kian on the old motor. Honestly, that thing just worked perfectly, and I put it down to the needles that they had. But I played around with it on this bike, but I just couldn't get rid of this dead spot. And then I went back to the Mikuni, and I just spent more time reading about the needles and understanding and trying to find what I wanted, and then eventually got the needle that I like, and I think it's amazing now. So I'm happy as with it, really happy.
Oh, mate. Right. Well, I'll have to tell Shui to send you a message and find out what it is. What is it? Like, if you don't mind me asking, because Shui messaged me and he's like, this new bike with the Mikuni carb, he's like, it's just a turd. And he threw it and went and bought himself a Kian carb and went and got the old one again.
Yeah, it's at the top end of the Kian when it's on there that I found I didn't like, and it's unpredictable. So you'd be going for a flip and all of a sudden it'd sputter or something. I'm like, ooh, that's not good. So I off the top of my head, I can't remember. I just did my motocross bike, so I remember that better. But I can't remember the needle. But it's the smallest pilot you can get for it. I believe it's S4 nozzle jet, and I think it's a 450 main. One thing of freestyle, a lot of the guys would go too lean on the mains, but we're actually sitting in the top of the rev range when we leave the ramp.
Yeah.
But my take is always run a nice and small pilot, because we're cruising around. You don't want it to foul up, you want it to be nice and clean. But so it's always been really hard to bridge that pilot to the main with the needle. Mm-hmm. So that was the biggest challenge for me, is finding the right needle for this. And I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. It's got some crazy number. Like I still remember on my Kians, our NOZFs or NOZG would be what we play. I can only tell you that because it's nice and easy to remember. Like these are 6 something, like all these different meters. I'd have to check my notes. But if anyone actually wants to know, I can pass it on.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic, because like if anybody who's ridden a KTM 250 will know, jetting it for freestyle is one of the biggest pains in the ass you may ever have. You might be lucky, you might know somebody who can tell you exactly what to put in at the right altitude or whatever, but it took me a very long time.
Is whenever someone asks for a setting from me, I'll give it to them happily. But they never put the whole thing in. They might put the jets in, if not spark plug or the.
That was my next question. Was spark plug as well?
Yeah. I've just run a BR9 EIX the whole time, and it runs awesome.
BR9, so that's even cooler than stock.
Yeah, the BR8 stock. So I mean, it's just worked, and it seems to. I haven't had an issue. If I don't run it, it's a little bit gluggy. And then obviously, if I'm in the States or somewhere that's accessible to VP, I just use C12. That's what it say. And then here in New Zealand, I just run avgas, but I mix it 50-50 with, say, 95. I find it just runs a little bit too lean. 100%, I kind of like it mixed. and
Yeah,
then just
right.
60-1 with the oil, just as the manual says. Nice and simple.
Yeah, right. Okay.
If
That's
you want
that's
to get if
interesting.
you want to get a little bit crafty, put it. I mean, just purely by feel, the V forces are amazing as well. The reeds,
Well,
um,
that was the thing
but I can
when.
take it or leave it.
Oh yeah.
I just it's just for a little bit of throttle response. Like I don't notice too much outside of it. So if
Yeah.
whatever reason I didn't have one, I'm not concerned.
Yeah. Like one. The thing that really made a big difference for me when I was riding my KTM is I went from BR8 stock, and so this is a problem Shui and I were trying to work out for a very long time, and then the KTM factory guys in Australia just said go BR7, just go
Mm,
one hotter, continue with your same jetting settings that you're running. Just go one hotter on your spark plug. And I never, ever fouled a spark plug ever again. Whether that didn't give me a good power delivery, I don't know. But I didn't fail any more spark plugs. And that was my biggest issue I had. I couldn't go anywhere
yeah,
without having this huge problem. So
it's
that
so
was,
funny. I've
yeah.
I couldn't. Well, I'll say this touching wood, but like good setup, the plugs are not an issue, eh? And obviously, like you said, you found what works for you, and then your plugs are good.
Yeah.
But man, some people on the bikes just fail them all the time, and it
Yeah.
is what it is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
Um, One other thing with
CD.
like we
Oh,
were
sorry.
talking about. Sorry, no, I was just thinking earlier. One other thing was always quite funny traveling around. We were talking about like talking jetting and altitude and whatnot.
Yeah.
Now this was pure. This is all from Chad Gabe, who mechanic for me
Oh
for
yeah.
shoot very long time. I mean, all the stuff I'm talking about, I learnt from him and another friend Monty and another guy Gareth. Is um, a lot of this, all of this motor stuff, I did not learn on my own. Like it's all from experience around mechanics around me, so I got to give them credit. But Gabe always had like the bike sussed out at every event. We might be in Mexico at like 8,000 feet, or I remember Travis one year was really surprised when I double flipped in Salt Lake, and it was just chilling. Like, I mean, in the comp I under rotated, but in practice I was over rotating, so I chilled out of the comp and under rotated. But
Just a bit too much.
yeah, just I still nosed around and wrote it out, so it's okay. But anyway, the point of that yarn was with the funniest thing was we would never really change more than just the main jet or the clip on the needle. Like everyone thinks jetting is very complicated, but it's so simple and it's only small movements. But
Yep.
where we went, we would always change our fuel. Our biggest changes were always with fuel. So it's just
Right.
something to keep in mind if you do ride a two-stroke.
Well, there you go. Well,
Yeah.
so that actually makes me feel better about being so lazy, because when I
Yeah, yeah.
made, and I think I probably speak for most riders here, um, but when I made that change to BR7, keeping the jetting that we felt worked, so I was running exactly the same as Shui. I did not change the jets to pretty much 6,000 feet
Yep.
altitude. I didn't need to. I felt I had no need. The bike ran near on the same, maybe just a little bit down on power at 6,000 feet. But
Yep.
I, I just kept knuckling 75 foot, and I thought, fuck it. I don't care. It's only one show in the snow.
Yep.
I'm out of here tomorrow, so uh, I didn't really give a shit at that point. But yeah, no, I found what worked, and it pretty much went with me everywhere from that point. All right, so Carby's done. CDI, just quickly before we leave
Dead
the
stock.
engine, dead
Just dead
stock. All
stock.
right,
Yeah. I've never
that's
never even touched him.
that's crazy. So you've
Yeah.
got basically a dead stock engine with dead stock exhaust in terms of the shape and the volume, pretty much. Just the shape looks different. You've got a single speed, but everything
Yep.
it all sounds way too easy right now. Like
Well, that's the
it all
thing. You don't need to
sounds
overcomplicate it. Like, I mean, another thing with that motor is I'd always just, I generally just play with the base gaskets a little bit,
yeah.
and take the head. So I'd generally lift the cylinder a little
Oh
and
yeah.
then lower the head to keep the compression. And then the mufflers is another place. Like between jetting, cylinder, muffler, you can kind of get it sitting right where you want. Obviously, you could do a lot more if you wanted, but what's the point?
Yeah.
It
Yep.
worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. It does its job. All right, so let's move on to the frame.
Yeah.
And this part, I really like this part of what you've done. It's a fully custom frame. I read on your Instagram notes it was over 300 hours. It took five sorry 300 plus hours of printing. So I
Yep.
was like, okay, if you were doing printing for 8 hours a day, that would be 5 weeks every day, just constant printing, essentially, to try and sum up
Yep.
what 300 hours is. It's 22 pieces. um
Yeah. It's
how
yeah.
that was on the prototype, I guess, right?
Yeah. So that photo you're talking about, that's a plastic frame.
Yes.
At some stage, I'll pull up the photos and put them on Instagram of the near complete bike. I had it all printed out in plastic. Obviously had, say, the like a real motor and whatnot sitting in there, and the real parts that I would use. But before I obviously spent all that money, had everything made, and put the time in, printed it all out, checked everything from swing arm, frame, gas tank, air boot, triple clamps, yeah, just every single little piece. Yeah, so about 300 hours of printing. The printer will just run 24 hours a day.
Did it?
And it's pretty, the reason it was so many pieces is I've got two other printers that I prototype on. They're bigger. One of them's quite big that I print swing arms on. But the accuracy is not as, it might be half a mil, or it takes a lot more for me to get the tolerance correct on those. Whereas I have another printer that I use to print. It actually prints continuous carbon fibre, but it also does very accurate models, smaller models. So that's why I chose to use that. And anywho, yeah, so
Is
I just
that
let
the
that run
Mark
all day.
Forged?
Yeah, Mark Forge Mark II. It's a very small print feed actually, but it and it's pretty reliable. So I think I had maybe 2 failed prints that whole time, whether that was a power cut or every now and then it might pop off the bed or just have something happen. So that's why I printed on that, and yeah, just let it run, and just monitoring that. Just sometimes just set an alarm at 3 in the morning just so you can change a print over and have it done, rather than waste an extra 5 hours or whatever it is.
Right.
And yeah, and so that at the same time I also had the other printers going to print, other things like the ear boot, which was I could get away with the tolerance, not half a mil, and that's probably okay when I'm just test fitting. And same with the swing arms and whatnot like that. So yeah, that's how that went.
Holy crap. All right, so that was the plastic.
Yep.
What is the end material that frame is made out of?
Chromoly. So it's all
It
chromoly
is?
steel. Yeah, 4130. It is all CNC, apart from CNC components, apart from CNC machine components, apart from the frame rails. So they're the main two perimeter rails going up, and I guess the cradle, if you want to call it that, below the engine, which has just been mandrel bent. Everything else is I've had. There's some plate on there which is laser cut. She had a water jet cut on this last one. There's quite a few 3D printed components. Now that is off the top of my head, I may get this wrong. It's 17-4 pH stainless steel, I believe, and that's what people generally use if they're printing for chromoly. It's got similar characteristics. Now that's, it might be the lugs where the subframe's mounted, or just really intricate little parts. Like there's a little gusset at the top of the frame I could have made out of plate. I was like, oh, screw it, I'll get I'll just get it 3D printed. Like the steering stops are 3D printed, so I'm just kind of looking at it and seeing what else is. And the last one I even just had the serial number 3D printed just for the novelty of it. So all the rest like that, and then everything else is all CNC.
That is so pointless, but so funny that you did that for the.
Yeah, I mean, I could stamp it, but 3D
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and like all your stem, your foot peg mounts, everything else on that bike's all CNC, which is awesome because man, it's a joy to weld and fit together. And it got to the point where I just wanted everything's got such tight tolerances. I couldn't really afford to not have it CNC machined, or 3D printed, and then it's just perfect, So, and then I think the cool thing is when I pull out of the jig, it barely moves. And I put that down to just the tolerance of it all, everything just fits perfectly beforehand. So that's the much of the frame right there.
Stupid question. So don't shoot me, but 3D printing,
no,
it is, obviously it's not that it's a new thing, but it is becoming much more accessible for so many more people. So as we were leading into this chat, I was actually watching videos about that Mark Forged printer that you've got and why people use that one in particular. And then, you go down the rabbit hole of YouTube videos of where did 3D printing start from? It's actually 40 years old. I didn't even realize.
Yeah, it's the 80s, is that right?
Yeah. And so it's something that's been around for a long time, and it is something that's becoming so much more accessible now. And are you able to, like, you've just said a whole bunch of parts in that frame are 3D printed, so it is pushing out quality that is strong enough for you to do freestyle motocross on. Like what it can produce, what it can produce is strong enough. Simple as that.
Yep, like it's not as strong as billet. I think I read somewhere now. Someone's going to tell me I'm wrong here, I'm sure, but I think in a certain axes it's printed to. Now I'm talking about what's it called? I'm terrible. I mean, I can do and draw and build all stuff. I just don't know the names of terminology for anything. But this is
Don't get too crazy. I mean, we're just freestyle fans that are listening here.
yeah. No, but so the metal stuff that's printed is it starts with a powder and it's laser welded, and it's layer by layer. It might be at like 0.05 mil per layer. So very accurate.
0.05 of a mil.
Yeah,
per layer.
Yeah, and so it's pretty cool. Where I was going with that is a certain direction. It is close to billet strength, but it's not. Someone's going to be able to tell me the exact numbers, I'm sure, but vertically it's not. It's a lot weaker vertically on that plane. So you got to be strategic where you use it. Obviously, if you need real strength, you don't look past billet. So you won't use it for everything, but certain things it's going to be ample for.
Yeah.
I think vertically.
And it's going to be more precise then. Would it be more precise than billet?
No, billet's pretty accurate.
Is it?
Printing is very accurate, but like let's say you're getting a thread or somewhere you're going to press a bearing in or whatever, you're going to want to remachine it. It just doesn't. We haven't quite come out of the CNC machining world yet, and I don't think we will for that reason. As much as I do like the printing, it just has its place. But then in saying that, you can do crazy like shapes and structures because of it, which can be stronger. That you just can't get CNC tooling in there. So, I mean, I've got this sample sitting on my desk right now. It's a bottom bracket for a mountain bike, and it's actually full of a lattice structure internally, but it's all a shell. There's not a chance you could produce it any other way apart from printing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it has its place.
Awesome. No, that's really cool. And actually, what's even better about 3D printing, what I saw on those videos is, in my mind, when I'm thinking of 3D printing, it's like the plastic, layer by layer, and you've got these really ugly, you can see the layers when you finish, but you don't have that anymore. It's just...
No, it's pretty close. It's pretty good. And if you need to, like say in plastic, like resin printing, it's pretty bang on from the beginning, eh?
Yeah. No, that's cool. All right, so that's the frame, which is completely custom. Swing arm, and now swing arm, I guess everybody's already seen.
Yeah.
You know, Harry Binks got one, and Jo Archer's got one from you as well. But yeah, tell us about the swing arm because it looks visually the most appealing, I suppose, about the with the bike.
Yeah, Swingarm, I mean, it's this, I mean, same style and process and idea behind it than what I've done for the other bikes. I'm pretty sure I actually designed this one on this bike before I even designed the ones on my for the other bikes.
Huh.
The As I was designing this in the early days, I was like, oh, I'm going to build a few kit things for just a stock bike because that's what I was riding at that stage, you know. And so I done some triple clamps and swing arm and whatnot. Yeah, so it is what it is. This is a PDS swing arm and shock setup. So it actually uses the KTM PDS Shock. The way it's
So
positioned.
for the Jap riders playing at home, that means you have no linkage.
Correct. Now, the reason being, I don't like greasing linkage bearings.
I love it.
And you know, you just don't have any need for freestyle. There's no need for linkage, not one bit. So that's cool. So it rides and handles mint, jumps awesome. So obviously there is a weight savings for no linkage, but if you look at the swing arm, obviously there's the top shock mount's pretty substantial, so that does add a little bit more weight, but makes up for it without extra bearings and the linkage setup. The reason the shock position is the way it is kind of weight. I wanted to have it nice and central, obviously as close as I could to the center of the bike. And it was to do with keeping that shock angle similar the further it went through the stroke. So it's actually, I think it actually moved. Well, it wouldn't even be half a degree, I don't think, in the end. So little things like that is kind of how that design came about. So the swing arm looks very light, but I'm pretty sure it's the same weight as a stock one.
Huh.
But the added benefit of it is no linkage, the simplicity of PDS as well as the length of it.
Yeah, so the length of the swing arm, I'm going to guess, is shorter.
Yep.
And where the wheel can come in means you've shortened the length of that wheel as well.
Yes, and I think they had another reason. There was another reason why I got rid of the linkage. Now I'm actually thinking back to it, because on the stock, say the KTMs that I've built swing arms for, the next limiting factor for the wheelbase is you start rubbing on the linkage knuckle when it goes so short. So you can actually shorten the hoop of the swing arm up as much as you want, but you're going to start hitting the linkage. Yeah. So that actually was one of the other factors of going PDS.
So to go this PDS system, this will be even shorter than, let's say, what JO's riding or what Harry Binks riding. This is even one step better again on your bike.
Yeah. I think off the top of my head, the longest the swing arm will go is the shortest those boys' swing arms can go.
Oh, wow.
The reason I did that is I wanted shorter, but I knew that those ones worked very good. So at least, you know, if I didn't like it too short, which I didn't know why I wouldn't, but it's just to be safe there. I don't think you want to go too much shorter, to be honest. You'll be on a unicycle. But
that was actually going to be my next question was, can you go too far with this?
Yeah, you can. Another thing that's an issue is actually, ideally, in the ideal world, I wouldn't shorten the swing arm at all. I'd just move the pivot point forward.
Okay.
It kind of affects a lot in that way. So, but we don't live in that ideal world, and because of the engine and all the rest of it, we can't. And it has to be, the pivot point has to be where it is. So you've got to compromise and shorten the swing arm. So that is why that's shorter.
Okay.
Yeah.
The wheels, are they standard size, 21 front, 19 back, or they are?
Yeah. So they're dead stock. That's funny. That's one thing I don't think that in freestyle we should have any sort of regulation around bikes. But the only thing I think we should is the wheel size. The reason being is, motors, take it or leave it. Some have benefits. You go out and ride a 125 if you want, if it's going to help you. But at the same time, it's going to be a disadvantage for certain things as well. Same as a 450 versus 250. So I don't think capacity is any issue. But when you start playing with wheels, they're actually one of the biggest restrictors in our sport, I think, because we look at BMX versus mountain bike, the way that they can rotate and spin,
Yeah.
that's due to the wheel weight and the wheel size. So
Well, that's it, because that's what you said in the previous podcast. When
yeah.
This is why I asked the question.
Oh, okay,
I would
yeah.
never have known that if you didn't say that in the last one. Between a BMX with the smaller wheel and a mountain bike with the larger one. So then I was wondering for the last year, why would you restrict yourself then? Like, why not go 20 on the front and 18 on the back? Like, it wouldn't make a big difference in physical, like looking at it, but it could give you a huge advantage, couldn't it?
You could, but I think it's just part of the idea with all of this is I wanted it to represent a dirt bike.
Okay.
Because then we end up going down some other avenue and end up riding scooters in the end of it, and I don't think, yes, the wheels are. They restrict our rotation to the point that we can't do completely upright 360s, and by reducing wheel weight, that's going to help us a lot. But that's my idea. I mean, everyone can have their own opinions on it, but that's where I went with that, and that's why I stuck to it myself.
No. That was just something that I'd been thinking of since you said that last time, and I never thought of it. It would never have been a consideration for the wheel sizes, and then I was like, all right, imagine someone, even if they went just the 20-inch enduro wheel on the back, you're like, you can buy that from a shop, so it's pretty normal. Sorry, not 20-inch, 18-inch enduro. I was still thinking of the front. 18-inch rear wheel, and I was like, well, if you're doing that, then you're already going down a rabbit hole anyway. But okay, so at the moment we're saying 2119. That's what's on there now. That's what's there. Have you changed the tires? Like, have you gone for a thinner walled tire to lose weight, or something that I think I heard this from Tom Pages. For freestyle, he prefers a much harder wall for the fact that when the bike's in the ramp and the tire is compressing, he doesn't want the tire to compress too much. So he was, maybe I got that story wrong, but that was what I heard. That he
I think that's pretty valid. I've got different tires. It's funny, for me, the tire weight and tire wall is a negotiation between, say, overall weight and performance versus a little bit of safety. Forever I run Dunlops, and the main reason being is if I got a flat on the course, they were stiff enough that I could continue and jump without, if I hadn't noticed. Yep. Whereas if you, say, have a Pirelli and you have a flat in the corner, you're going to spin out and do like a 540 just because they're so soft, they'll just explode. So that's how I determine my tires, and kind of adjust the pressure and whatnot accordingly, tire size and whatnot. Also, another thing over the years is a tie pattern is a big thing versus the ramp mesh. And that's why I'm real picky with how ramps are built, and say mesh and whatnot is if you have, let's say your regular run of the mill tire, your Dunlops or Bridgestone, whatever, mid compound, whatever, kind of quite small knobs on them. You need smaller mesh because otherwise on the ramp they'll stick into the mesh.
Yeah.
And then what happens as soon as you try and whip or you're slightly off centered or whatever, they pull you right to the other side. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this that are listening.
I know anyway, that feeling.
Yeah. So that's always got something to do with it. Originally, I used to used to love running like 120s, real heavy
Yeah.
a heavier rear wheel. Part of that was because we used to ride dry shitty courses all the time, and it just worked as a bit of traction control. The other reason is, man, it was awesome for doing whips. It just spin the back wheel out epically.
Really?
But I prefer lighter now as a trade-off because of rotating from doubles, singles, or just whatever, and whipping. Adjust your technique to it, and you can find positive for it. So
Yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
that's kind of gone to.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Again, going back to the days of well, it could be anywhere really. I don't worry about what tire it is. I'm generally pinching the leftovers from the races, because
Yeah,
a
man.
race is like, oh no, that tire's done, and they're tossing it. I'm like, mate, that's near on brand new. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
if I did one day on a mesh run up and a mesh ramp, it's going to look 10 times worse than that. So I just
That's
take
right.
whatever races are thrown away, basically. So yeah, but don't listen to me, kids. All right, forks, air forks.
Yeah, just regular run-of-the-mill air forks for the KTM, the WP forks. Obviously, like I said, I've lowered them for no reason apart from to try and keep that height of the front end similar to what a stock bike is. Um, and yeah, that's about it. It's the same setting that I run on my old bike. Obviously, the shock was pretty fun to work out. Obviously, I didn't really have to do any of that. I had a friend of mine, Rennie, he figured it out and he hit it. He hit the nail on the head the first time, which was pretty exciting.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
This is going a little bit off topic, but would you go? Obviously, you've chosen air forks, so that is your choice. But air forks or oil, standard, conventional. What's your thoughts there? Because
Like coil
I'm
spring.
still I still prefer the old style.
Yeah, so for freestyle, hands down, any day air forks. Um,
Yeah, right.
the only reason I would consider coil is there's air forks come at the added risk of a potential leak, but they're relatively safe nowadays. Touching wood when I say this. But the thing I love about the air forks is one, the weight, and you can just move the bike around and it's crazy the difference it makes. It's like over a kilo lighter. And the other reason is the adjustable air pressure. So one thing I had issues with over the years is I was always fighting stiffer forks to the rear just for like it was. So I always liked it nice and proud off the takeoff. But when you are practicing, say here in New Zealand, and it's 20 degrees Celsius, and your setting is primo and you're honky dory, and you go to Spain or ride in the States somewhere, and it's like you're pushing 40 degrees Celsius sometimes. The oil thins out. I think that's what it is. And it's just so soft and doughy, and it just starts. Um, it nearly kicks the rear end a bit more. It dives through the ramp. Now, this is probably not the best way to go about it, but the quick fix is just up some pressure, you know. So, and I will.
Yeah, but if you're in a competition mode and you don't have
Oh
time to
yeah, and it
be
works. It works a
stuffing about,
treat.
then hey, why
Works a
not?
treat. Yeah, and I actually do play with the pressures time to time depending on what I'm doing, but generally right now just max pressure. And it's awesome. The bike needs to be as rigid as it possibly can, and that's purely just for the takeoff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Explain why. I know why, but I want to hear it from you.
You just want it predictable, and you want the pop. You want the front end to be proud off the ramp, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's about it. The stiffer it is, the better response it is, the better it whips, easier it flips. If you got a softer rear end and you go to flip, all your energy is going into the shock rather than actually spinning it off the ramp, and vice versa, Now, talk to the front flip guys and they will tell you probably something different and for a valid reason. So this is set for the style of riding I do, versus what other people may like. But that's just my take on it.
No, that was what I was thinking, because that's a more conventional way of riding. Like you say, if you're going to talk front flips now, that's
Yep. Yeah. I wouldn't
complete
even know
opposite,
where to
isn't
start, you know. Yeah. But
it?
maybe it's relative, maybe it's not. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's it. All right, so that's the forks. We already spoke about the shock, how you've got no linkage and why it sits so high up as well. You know, you're trying to get the mass centralisation. So shock's covered. Triple clamps, are they custom made or are they off the
Yep, yep. So
shelf?
they're custom made. You could
Bloody hell.
nearly assume everything's custom made. um, Triple clamps stock 22mm offset, um, and obviously the fork angle is the rake is a lot steeper. That is for the landings. So we don't need the rake for stability, and we're not going fast. We're actually just essentially nearly a vertical fall. What I've
Mm.
found over the years is to get the best performance from the forks, I actually had to nose it in to land.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah. I know exactly what you mean. You got to
yeah,
come in a little bit nose heavy, and actually
yeah,
everything works better.
yeah. And man, you know, if you asked me a few months ago, when this was all quite relative, I could tell you details of everything, but I'd have to recheck the actual degrees. But it's a good 2 degrees steeper, I think, maybe 3. Um, but that's a bit of off the top of my head, bit of a guess. What else
And
about the triple
as
clamp?
soon as you steepen that rake up, every degree you've made it steeper, I assume every degree makes it spin faster.
Correct. It's by shortening the front end of it
Yep.
as well, you know.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and then triple clamps are solid mounted. They're set up for a 36mm bar, which is the new rental bar. It's like half the weight of any other bar that I've found. So it's epic. It's amazing.
Oh, so
Um,
you do have some parts that you had to buy a rental handlebar.
yeah. You don't fix what ain't broke. Yeah, so the rental bars on there, they're primo, nice and light. I like solid mounting. It's just freestyle. Who cares otherwise, you know? So there's no twist or anything that you got to worry about. And by solid mounting the bar clamps, I think I saved 50 grams in the triple clamp and bar setup, and that's mostly
Yeah.
for the bolts, just the way I could design it.
Yeah, right.
And the lower triple clamp set up to house the steering stabilizer.
Oh
Um,
yeah, because you got the. I mean, we
it's
can
like,
talk about that in the
yeah,
FMX part
yeah,
as well. But that's a special stabilizer as well that you're running.
yep.
In there, I do have the brakes. You said you haven't got the brakes on there yet, but you've got them coming, and you've dropped what was it, 1.2 kilos or something on brakes.
Yeah. So that's the one thing on the bike I did not design. I went to a couple lads in New Zealand. They design and make mountain bike brakes. Their company's Reddick Performance, Reddick Brakes, Reddick Performance. I got it Instagram. Awesome stuff. And they're actually qualified engineers, unlike myself. So they designed the brakes for me, and they are like a hybrid of, say, mountain bike versus dirt bike.
Okay.
And they had redesigned the calipers, the discs, and the master cylinders. And then I had them redesign. One of the things that I am waiting on still is the master cylinder for the clutch. So
Oh,
then, I have the Radic set up front and left and are nice and matching. And then I've gone and redesigned a set of flip levers that are nice and snug that suit the smaller levers. Um,
yeah.
yeah, so I mean that's the brake setup. They've saved, I think it's about 1.2 kilos we worked out overall from front and rear.
That's a
Um,
huge saving just on brakes.
yeah, it's crazy. It's awesome. So little things like that are just a kind of nice little finishing off pieces once they're running.
Yeah. Fuel tank. That's a big one because
Yep.
clearly you've got an exhaust system going through where the fuel tank should be. If I look at the picture again now, you can also see straight through your fuel tank where it should be, and I can see your desk in the background. So
Yeah.
where the bloody hell's this fuel tank?
So the fuel tank sits right above the carburetor and behind the cylinder.
Yep.
Um,
It looks like
it's
that little oil can, doesn't it? Because
yeah,
I had some people saying, "Oh, he's got a what is he? So he doesn't have to premix or something?" Oh no, I
yeah,
think you might find that's
no.
his petrol.
Yeah. So it's I've seen a few people say, "Oh, it's got a fuel tank. It only needs to last 2 minutes. It's freestyle." Which yes, that could be the case, but the bike's built and designed so you can actually go ride a full freestyle session in practice. Because the last thing you want to do is fill up every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So it holds enough.
What do
It rides
you
about
call a full session, though?
about 40 minutes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I can get 40 minutes out of it, and I will fill up. So generally, I mean, nowadays I'd be doing well to burn that out. I don't ride if I go ride freestyle, I'll go and do a few whips and some flips, and I'm happy. But in the heyday, I would have probably filled that up, and I'd probably leave an hour sesh. So it does about 40 minutes, and it just sits up, obviously behind the cylinder, and now you probably know where you're looking. You'll see it in the front of the shock and just above the carburetor. That took me about might have been 6 or 7 designs to get that correct. Just it's very very tight and snug between carburetor, the shock, and obviously the exhaust. So and then also trying to fit the fuel tap in there. You'll see it's on a bit of an angle, and it all
Oh
worked in the end, but
yeah,
I can't
I didn't
remember.
even notice
Yeah,
that.
that's just a stock KTM fuel tap. But I remember spending hours and hours and hours trying to find a fuel tap that would suit this design with a filter that I liked and the correct diameter, and I just couldn't. Because I kind of wanted one that was a 90-degree bend, and I just can't remember. But anyway, worked out that it was just had to make that fit, and to get it to fit correctly, I had to put it on the diagonal, and obviously all the tanks all laid, so it does run to that, to the fuel tap. And then you'll see on the photo, it might be stained red, but there is a sight glass in it. With these fuel tanks are so small, there's no chance that I'm going to run it without a sight glass. So I can keep an eye
Right.
on that as I ride, which is an
I
awesome
didn't
feature.
notice the
Yeah,
sight in it.
yeah. So the what's happened is it's a 3D printed fuel tank. It's 3D printed with nylon and fiberglass.
Okay.
SLS printing, which is the powder printing, and it's been dyed black because it is grey originally, and that's why it's stained the sight glass. I do need to actually probably put a tank liner in, but it works. So I just haven't really been too concerned.
So
um,
you weren't too stressed then if the petrol leaked, or not leaked, but like leached anything out of the 3D printed tank?
I was, but it hasn't affected it as much. So I'm not too concerned right now. I was actually more concerned about tank liners just from what I was reading about them. So that's why I was willing to have a crack at it.
Yeah.
And it was just purely the dye, because the nylon is obviously chemical resistant. Yeah, I mean, and this is from the backyard engineer, the bush mechanic side of me. It's like I'll just get in there, have a go, and seem to work out all right. And I don't think the dye is an issue. So yeah, it is what it is.
Tip top.
Yeah.
And the last one on this segment is the air filter. So we're looking right next to the fuel tank is your air filter. The one
Yep.
thing that sticks out to me is the physical size of that black piece of plastic, like the airbox
The
boot you
boot. Yeah.
call it.
Yeah.
Why is that so big?
Well, that's modelled off the stock one. So just like the expansion chamber, I knew I didn't know enough to design my own.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
and how I did this was kind of the same way. Like, there's a couple things I really took a bit of a guess on, and it just worked. I mean, guesstimate, whatever, educated guess. So I went and took the stock air boot. I think I'd done 2 different versions of it. I 3D scanned it one way, and then I just purely just done a volume measurement with water, and just kind of made it fit. And I think I went off the volume measurement. At that stage, I'm pretty sure I'd done a little bit of reading about it. I can't really remember at the moment, but it's essentially the same volume as what the stock one is. And for me, I was like, oh, that's enough to get started. And so I designed it and had it fit. And it kind of looks similar shape the way they are, and that's pretty much to squeeze it around the shock. Now, this is 3D printed as well. And one of the other things that I think the bike runs quite well is it's quite stiff. So that it's not like sucking in at all. It's 3D printed out of nylon and fiberglass. The fiberglass is in the nylon, obviously, to stiffen it up because nylon's very flexible.
Yeah.
So I just took a stab in the dark, seriously, and it works mint. So primo. And then just a twin air pod filter on it, nice and easy to change.
So I am not a mechanic at all, and
Yep.
I'm guessing most people listening have a rudimentary idea, but are not mechanics either. And you said you're not either, but so you've kept the exhaust, what comes out of the engine, relatively the same volume. You've tried to keep what goes into the engine relatively the same volume. And you just said before you didn't know better, basically. What was there one part of you thinking, why don't I just make something smaller or lighter or whatever and just see what happens? Like, did you want to just experiment and just do it? And because, like I said, I look at this and think it's quite a big shape in there. Like, if that was obviously the hole that goes into the carburetor is only quite small, but there's a reason why it has such a big volume and a specific shape to direct air through the carby, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And like I said, I don't really know enough to comment on it, but I'm pretty sure you really want the air volume there because, sure, if you roll the throttle on slowly, it might keep up. But if you chuck it on and it's like, you just wind it right open, which is kind of how we ride, it's got nothing to suck, so it might choke it. Now, I'm purely just having a bit of banter right here. I don't know too much. Like I said, I knew enough to realize I don't know enough to even start to look at it, and the reason I was like, with the expansion chamber, I was more confident than the air boot, because all the cone shaping and whatnot was very interesting. Once I actually scanned the original expansion chamber and straightened it out, I could see the cones and their lengths and diameters very, very easily. But as it is in current like stock form, you don't really see it. It just looks like one continuous shape. So that gave me a bit more confidence about the expansion chamber. But the air boot, I was pretty much like, I got to start somewhere. This is my best guess. And I'm happy to just, you got to start somewhere to figure out where you need to be next. And obviously it just works so sweet as. And like I said, the jetting, I didn't even change the jetting. I just moved I lifted the needle one clip. And whether that had to do with the exhaust or the air boot, who knows? Yeah. So it's coming out pretty close.
Man, that's crazy. Yeah. We've spent a lot of time even just talking about an airbox just in this little chat.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've spent so much time about something that's been designed before and whatever. So it's just quite funny to hear you say, I don't know enough about it. And you are smart enough to go with that answer as well. Like, don't go stuffing about with things you don't actually know.
Yeah. There's a lot. These big, KTM and all the other companies put so much time into development and R&D over the years. Like, what I know is how a freestyle bike should handle and the ideas around how it performs. And man, that motor just is epic for it. So I don't want to change too much around it, Nor do I think I could. So it just works and it is what it is.
Sweet as. All right, let's move on to the ergonomics. There's only 3 things in the ergonomics, and that's maybe one of... Sometimes I feel the most important for you to be happy. The seat, handlebar, pegs, the relationship with how you sit on the bike, what you hold on to, and what your feet are standing on can completely change whether I like a bike or whether I think it's a turd and I'll never ride it. So, for example, when I was very lucky to do like bike testing for Freerider magazine, and test every bike in one day: the Honda, the Yami, the Cowie, the CZ, and the KTM's. And when I did that, I really started to learn how each bike, where they're going with their design. And I found out quickly why I like my Yamahas at the time
Yep.
over Honda. I have never sat on really a Honda that I actually liked riding. I just don't get the feel. Maybe maybe they've brought out a model and I haven't sat on it in a few years. But so yeah, the seat, the bars, the pegs. Obviously, this is for freestyle motocross. It's for tricks. It's for performance. Was there anything about that that was for comfort?
Oh, not one bit. Like I said, like when I ride down to my freestyle setup, just ride across the farm, like she's not very nice to ride, but it's not designed for that, But as soon as she's on a freestyle setup with a ramp and a run up, it's the best thing I've ever ridden for that, So that is what it is. So we're the reason of saying that is it's not very comfortable, but when it's on a nice concrete run up, I'm happy. It's nice and comfy.
Yeah.
The bar position to the foot peg position is actually very similar to what I'm used to for a KTM. Obviously the front end's shorter, but I kind of got around that by steepening up the rake, and that left the bars in a similar position.
Yeah. Yep.
It's kind of, if you don't like the bar position, it's kind of tough cookies at the moment because
that's where it is. It's stuck there.
It's right where I like it, and that's where it needs to be. Ergonomics. Yeah, so foot pegs, bars about the same. Seat, I think it sits a touch lower. Obviously, it's a custom seat and seat foam.
It looks like a bloody ironing board. It looks as flat as flat.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind adding about 10 mil foam to the seat. The reason I haven't is just haven't been bothered to print another mold out because I 3D printed the seat mold and just poured foam for it. Yeah. So there's no seat foam cutting or nothing, which is quite nice.
Nice.
And yeah, like I said, I just couldn't bother printing another mold. I really did want to get, actually emailed them, but I never heard back. I think Guts and Think seat foams, they do a certain seat foam material that's like half the weight that I wanted to have machined up. But obviously there's not a lot of foam there, but it's still enough that I would like to save some weight on. I do have a friend that's found out what foam it is, so I probably will have it machined at some stage. But yeah, that's the seat. One thing that is slightly different to what I'm used to, which I think has more of a Japanese bike feel, is the relation from your bar to your seat. The grab is slightly lower, but
yeah, it
by
looks
lower
a
on
bit like that.
Yeah, it might be about 20 or 30 mil. But when you've been riding the same bike for 10 years and done the thousands and thousands of jumps over it, you'd be surprised how natural it is to go back to the old position. But it's just something you get used to. Obviously, it has like the eternal grab hole, and some may think that the radiator shrouds in front piece is somewhere to grab, which it could be, but it hasn't been designed that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, like one other thing I will comment on is if you look at the bike, I tried to have it as open as it could, like it's free flowing. So the reason being, this is just a little bit out there and just because I could. Whether it makes a big difference or not, I'm still yet to find out. But I wanted, the radiators to be nice and free flowing. Obviously the whole rear end not to catch too much wind, and the front fender is vented out the front and the back side of it. The vent at the back of the fender, half of the reason is to try and get just a touch more air to that one radiator.
Yeah.
But also, anyone who's ridden with a headwind will notice how much your front end captures the headwind and it pushes it up.
Yes.
So that's the idea behind that. And so far, it's been really good in the wind. So, I mean, I'd like to say I put it down to the bodywork, but who knows? Could be, might not be. Maybe it's a little bit biased.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the idea
really
behind that.
Actually.
Yeah.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question, because bodywork and graphics is, let's say if you're buying a motorbike, that's where they're going to talk about their shrouds and printing and all new design. Wow. And the front fender was one of the main things that stood out to me in this design with that venting, and I was like, my first thought was Sean Richardson, old Richo. He would have went for that one-handed Superman earthquake, I think he called it.
That was it.
I was like, oh, well done. But it sounds like it wasn't designed for that.
No, it's purely just for the ear for a windy day. Front plates obviously shaped so, if we're doing cliffhangers and whatnot. Slightly shorter fenders, kind of just like the look of it. And yeah, I mean, so it was made, just don't have the stuff I don't need. Obviously the rear end is its own structure as well. The side plates and what you would maybe call the earbox, or the fender part, is one piece. The rear fender is one piece, and where the seat is its own piece. Now, the seat will support itself without the side plate mechanism, not the structure. So that's structural as well as the side plates, and tied together it makes it very strong. The fender
wait. The side plates, what you'd call the side plates, is essentially the frame and side plates in one.
Yep. So it's like essentially the lower half of the subframe.
Yeah. And
then the top half is, the top half, I guess. I'd go and ride it with just the top part on. Obviously, there's not a chance I'm going to, but what I'm saying is that it could support you sitting around riding on it. It's very strong. I wouldn't go and seat bounce it. It's not designed to like that. But what I'm just saying is I made sure both of them could support enough, so when they're all tied together, it's pretty strong, it's pretty stiff, and then the rear fender's just thin and flimsy and made to break if it's crashed, So anything like the front fender, front plate, side plates, rear fender is thin and tiny, like it's just made for weight. It's just there for aesthetics, really.
Yeah.
And I just started playing around with some stuff the other day to not even use carbon fibre, just another composite. I play around with flexible composites a little bit in the past, but I might start to take it a bit more serious now, just for the front and rear fenders especially.
Yeah.
Just to have a bit more give. But so that's the bodywork really. If you look at the side plates, there's these kind of 3D printed wings on there. They were, here's another afterthought, I guess. Something I had changed is, but I worked out it was the boots in the end. It was quite slippery for my feet, because where they are, like I use that spot, and I'm sure a lot of other guys do, grip in there a lot, flipping, or whipping or whatever. But what the difference was, I hadn't ridden very much in the last couple of years, and Alpine Starts brought out a new boot, and I'm fully calibrated to the old one, and then the old ones had like a nice leather strip, and they were awesome, and nice and grippy. And the new ones were rubber, and
oh yes, I know
what you mean. I just can't grip with them. For motocross, they're amazing, but freestyle, I can't. So I'm lucky I stashed enough old boots away, and I just ride in those. But I just added those wings just as a nice sharp edge, just for an added benefit, and put a bit of grip tape on them.
Just to catch it if you needed it.
Yeah, but with the old boots, you don't really need them, but I think they kind of look cool there. So, and then obviously you can't beat carbon fibre graphics, so that's how that goes.
That's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Actually, like KTM, they print their graphics directly onto the shroud.
Yep.
There's no sticker with a KTM when you buy it.
Yep.
If you were to put logos on your bike for any sponsor, would you just put a sticker on and not give a shit, or would you go and print it directly on and try and cut down a 15th of a gram?
So I could, yes, you could. Obviously, you could put it in the mold and lay it up over it, and it's going to be very well protected that way through the resin.
Yeah.
But I don't believe there'd be any weight benefit because I'd just be using a decal. So if I was to put anything on it, it'd just be decals, and it'd be very, very subtle. Like I think I'm just looking at the design here in CAD, and I've actually got a couple of logos on it just because I'm playing around with it. But they're black, so if I was to do anything, it'd be dark grey logo or very subtle. I mean, I'm not in the world of having sponsors or anything now, so I don't need to care about it.
Yeah. Mate,
but that's how I'll do it, and I'll just put on decals rather than graphic. Graphics are very heavy, actually.
Exactly, that's
so
what I'm thinking.
You're nearly a kilo in them, I believe, maybe more. I think at one stage. And that's why on that last bike I never actually run graphics either. So.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. You've built this bike. I wouldn't cover up 1 centimeter of it.
I quite like it nice and raw.
So one other question I had about the back half of that, of all the carbon fibre and everything. So one thing I noticed when Luke Ackerman was going to every Night of the Jumps event or X Games or X Fighters, whatever, he'd have to travel with 2, if not 3 carbon fibre subframes because he was on the Husqvarna at the time.
It's composite subframes,
Yeah, and my first question to him was, why don't you just go and, get somebody to engineer you up a normal alloy subframe so you don't have to have this problem again. Anyway, maybe it was something with the sponsors, I don't know. But is that something you would have to think of when you're riding? If you were doing comps, would you have to take 2 or 3 of these with you just in case?
Well, if I was to do that, I'd probably travel with 2 of everything, but that's not for that reason. Not 2 of everything, sorry. But for the reason of back in the day, okay, I'll travel with 2 of anything custom I had. Anything KTM I know I could probably find, depending on where we were, and we'd always look into that. We'd look where the closest KTM dealer was, done a lot of background stuff before every comp. So this case, let's say Luke's case now, I'm not 100% sure of the swing arm he's got, but if it's a stock Husky one.
Well, he's back on KTM now, but
but when it was the one you're talking about,
yep.
That is a composite, not carbon, I believe. And I think it's injected, so I think it's like a plastic molded injected with certain fibers.
Yes, right.
I'm not 100%, so don't quote me on it, but that's my take on it. Now, I know they had a lot of trouble with them. I think they sorted them out in the end, actually. But this one, I'm not concerned one bit. Here's a fun fact for you. So I think every one of us are riding or listening to this has probably bent a subframe in their days. We've all landed a bit sideways, got it cross-rutted or done whatever, and pretty easy to bend a side frame and bend the exhaust around and whatnot. That last bike I had, which was the KTM with all the carbon stuff, the carbon fibre, like monocoque rear end and whatnot, so that was like a third of the weight of the stock rear end. And I could have gone, every time I just kept going lighter. I'm like, man, this thing just keeps holding up. And then its lightest version was when I broke my ankle and I was saying the bike fell 10.5 to 11 meters. It landed, if you watch the video, it landed on its bars in the subframe. And the subframe is hanging up in my workshop. All it did was it had it cracked the fender. So actually, it was designed with a brake line in the fender, so that was supposed to give. Reason being, if a body hit it or whatever, it's going to be a bit more forgiving. But the structure of the subframe is mint. Like, it doesn't show any signs of cracking or anything like that, let alone it be perfectly straight. Just because carbon either absolutely disintegrates or it's still straight. Generally. So where I'm going with that is I've got a lot of faith in this carbon setup, and I know that this one will probably be stronger than that setup because how I was talking about how I designed it. So no, I'm not concerned at all. Not concerned.
Mate,
the cool thing about this bike is I was actually thinking the other day, if I was to, which there's not a chance I probably ever would, but if I was to travel, just the way it's been designed, you could nearly take the rear end off, swing arm off, and your forks off, and your 3 bags, and you just put the whole centre unit in. It's it's very modular. When I was building it, designing it, obviously I was riding it, was designing it, and I was the one that had to fab it and obviously work on it. You always hear about mechanics complain about engineers and, why the heck you do this. So I had that added benefit of, all right, I'm designing this, all right, now I'm going to make it out of carbon fibre. What's the best shape to, it's the easiest for me to do it, as well as, what's the least amount of work it's going to be for me to put together and pull apart. So you're servicing or changing jets or checking something, you can just do it as easy as you can. So I had all of those, 3 criteria when I was designing it, which kind of adds to it,
That's perfect. Yeah, exactly
yeah.
why it works so well.
Yeah.
Right, so freestyle motocross specific, there's a few things on there. Flip levers. You did mention them before, and that was one thing I noticed very quickly. You've built your own flip levers. They look awesome.
Yep.
But you said you've built them around the new brake system that you're getting made anyway. Or have you got like let's say standard flip levers that could go on anybody's bike, or are they only specifically for this one?
So these ones are specifically for that brake setup.
Okay.
So this bike, right? I have designed a set that will work with anybody's bike. I just haven't given it the time to kind of follow it through and test them and whatnot. And maybe I will soon. I'm not sure. But they are, my last set of flip levers were just hand fab titanium jobs, and I had those for years and years, and they were very light. But I wanted to obviously make a new version, nice and slim and lighter, obviously. Yeah. Excuse me. And they, the coolest thing is they're symmetrical, side to side. It's my favourite thing about them. And if you actually look on the bike, obviously you can't see in that photo. I'm looking at the CAD design, spinning around in it. They match the shape of the bars, the contour of the bars, so that they're as slim and as hidden and out of the way as they can be, because of it. So that's what one of the little like things that top it off that I really like. So I'm looking forward to those brakes going on there, so I get them.
Do you have OCD or something that the perfect symmetry just, you're like, oh, that makes me feel better?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I do, but it's got to work and it's got to function well. And the coolest thing about what I just said is when I design the left one, I copy and paste and mirror it, so I'm only designing one at a time. So there is a few different benefits. 3D printed rubbers, obviously nothing new for me. They're mostly alloy and titanium. And yeah, it is what it is. It's nothing groundbreaking, but I guess the fact that the shape of them and how small they are is probably a cool part about it. Obviously, close to that I'm looking at right now is just a 3D printed bar pad. Nothing special again. I mean, I've done that before, but just nice and slim and enough padding, but still being, slim. I guess so you get your feet around it.
Yeah. Foot hooks. Foot hook or hooks?
Yeah, so
what do you
foot
have
hooks. Same as what we have maybe talked about in the past, what I've had on my old bike. It's just a 3D printed foot hook on the left. It's same motor because it's obviously on the motor. So that's the same. On the right is the same actually hook, but the brake pedal itself is custom. And I guess while we're down there looking at it, the shifter is fully 3D printed and it's custom. It's 3D printed alloy. Hollow aluminium, and it's a titanium tip, and also custom shape. So it's actually tucked right away. I know a lot of guys in the freestyle world will shorten theirs or they'll trim it back so they don't hit it. Yeah. So it's a different shape to normal. And then behind it, like all those chain runners and everything are all custom. And they're suited. I'd have to look it up. I can probably see it on the file now, but they're all specific plastic, nice and light. And it's crazy how Yeah, so it's a light plastic and it's very not like low friction. So when you spin the wheel, there's like next to no drag on it. It's pretty cool. Obviously very noisy because it's quite stiff, but it works. And it's all
Yeah, but
a CNC machine.
if it's less drag, then who cares how
Yeah.
noisy it is?
Oh yeah, done by me. So yeah, there's quite cool stuff. Yeah.
On the right hand side for your brake pedal.
Yep.
Maybe I was daydreaming for a second. Is that's a hook as well?
Yeah. So that's why. Sorry, I wasn't too specific there. It's a hook at the same time as a brake pedal. Now when I say
that's
the
what I
hook,
thought. I thought maybe I was daydreaming. I probably was because I was sitting here looking at trying to zoom in on pictures.
Yeah. No, that's just simple. It's just the toe pad of the brake pedal that is a hook as well, which is just 3D printed titanium, the same that I had made for my KTM. Obviously, I needed a custom brake pedal to just navigate the frame. Pretty similar to the Brembo setup, but it is custom for this bike.
What do you use that brake pedal foot hook for? I mean, for me personally, I used it for seat grab flips because I was always quite nervous that I'd miss my grab, which I did.
Yep.
And I also used it for the upside knack or the top knack or whatever you want to call that. What do you use it for? Because not many people have it.
No, so I forever just had the left hook, and the left hook, that was your no hand flips. It was your upside knacks or whatever you want to call.
Because you go that direction. I go.
Yeah, it just worked. I mean, and maybe I learned it that way because I had that hook. I don't know. The reason I started using two hooks is when I started doing no hand double flips, I couldn't really let go of one hook.
Yep.
As soon as I hooked my other foot in, and this was purely me just hooking under like a dead stock brake pedal, so no grip, no nothing, and I was like, wow, this kind of works. So
actually angles up. It's
it wants you to slide off. I'm pretty sure in that session I rode up to the workshop, cut 2.5 welded together, went back down like an hour later and started learning it. Like, that's how simple that side is, and I just adjusted the heights of it. So I only ever used two for no hand double flips. Nowadays I use two for double flipping purely because since I broke my ankle, I've lost the movement or just she's not working the same. So I always slip out of the left hook. So I just chucked the second in there for a safety, which is a real bummer because the one trick that I loved doing was that topside knack, and I haven't been able to do it since because I've just been too scared about my foot slipping out. Maybe I will do it in the future, maybe not. But that's why.
There you go, topside knack the other way. Go to the opposite side, mate. Go the way I go.
Might not be able, not the old dog might not be able to learn that new trick, I'm not sure.
No, I'm sure you can work that one out. Steering dampener. You spoke about that a long time ago now in the chat, but the steering dampener is completely different to everybody else's.
Yeah, so the steering stabiliser, I think I've said it before, is one of the things from the very beginning I've always had like a serious issue with. Obviously, we had a lot of guys use GPRs or similar ones, and they work well. They're nice and stiff, but I mean, they're just not designed to last, man. They just leak and they're rubbish. Even if you go on a flight from the altitude, you get back and the thing's seeping. So I was never a fan, but I obviously had to use it because I couldn't find anything better that was stiff enough. I had other ones that I made stiffer, but they'd just break things on them. So I mean, I give them credit to being that stiff, and they worked for that. So I made like mechanical dampers and all sorts and mucked around for all sorts of things. Anyway, that led me to that last bike, and I put the road bike stabilizer on that bike, and I really like that. That's probably my favorite one between the two. But with this bike, I was limited to space. Obviously because of the expansion chamber and the way that last one is. The way that last one, and it was the longest stabilizer I could get that suited it, and where it was, because it was mounted to the outside of the triple clamp lower bar, and it worked amazing on that bike. But for this one, I spent, like, I remember getting to a point, and the stabiliser was the last thing I had to do, and I remember walking away from the design for about a month because I just tried so many different things and I couldn't get it to work.
Huh.
And so then, I don't know, ideas come to you at weird times, and somehow I can't remember when that happened, but it comes to this, and this one started to fall into place. And
it's the one that's there just above where the
it's
left radiator shroud should be, right?
correct. So it's actually a very short stabilizer. It might be the shortest one they have, and it is it's the rod is mounted to the frame at the front and rear, and then the link is mounted to the body, and then there's a link that goes to the triple clamp.
Yeah.
I was hesitant to have, obviously I want the least amount of moving parts, but sometimes you just have to do what you got to do. And then there's also, it's quite funny, like everything's pretty, high tech, or not high tech, but just different. And one thing about having the link mounted to the body is it's free to rotate, which gives it slot. And that's one thing I'm like, how do I come up with this? And I was like trying to work out a roller system and like a guide and all this stuff. And in the end, all I did was 3D print a body to put behind it in the frame that essentially just holds it square. And it's amazing how well it works. And I put so Teflon, it's not Teflon tape, but like a Teflon sheet. They're using all sorts of stuff. It's I use it to use in some of my molds for certain things, but so I just stick that behind. It's like a gold thing, and maybe if you look close enough in the photo, you'll see it. So it's really archaic. The final piece to it. It cracks me up the way it is. But it works primo. I mean, it's real funny. That last bike I built, I had something really awesome stabilizer set up, but I had the same issue. It had just a slight bit of movement left to right, which gave a little bit of slop, and I couldn't work out anything. And I was just there for you're constantly looking at these things, trying to find a solution. And one day I'm just like, stuff. I'm just going to put a real dootsy rubber band on it for now. And it worked, and I never changed it. One of my buddies just was laughing at me. He's like, "Dude, you've done this epic job. But the finishing touch to make it work is like a rubber band." And I'm like, man, sometimes it just works, So anyway, that's one of those things. Maybe this is slightly more high end of the rubber band, but it kind of makes me laugh.
Yeah, you don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time, do you?
No, just so it's just like a bit of a guide, I guess, but it works. Yeah, anyway, it works awesome. It works really well. I love it. It's that style of dampener is the best. It just like that dampener on that bike is about 3 years old. Like it's not even new for this bike. I've used it on my other bike, on a different stabilizer setup over and over and over, and I haven't even serviced it once. It's crazy. Like I was servicing dampeners twice a week when I rode all the time. Obviously, I don't ride at that rate, but it just goes. It's stiff. I've got a 3D printed dial on it, just to help me figure out where it is. It's got a little arrow and thing. I guess when we're talking in, like, let's say we're in a competition world right now. If I was to, one of the things I'd play around with if I was competing would be, I'd probably design a quick turn dial for it. I don't know for me what that means. I'm not sure because I haven't pulled it apart, but it's 2 turns from softest to the stiffest mode. Yeah. But in saying that, I never really go past 1 turn back. So whereas
you'd be looking for like a quarter turn sort of
system, to do the full dial. Yeah. So like your GPRs, you can kind of get away with half a turn, which is awesome when you're out there on the bike. But I mean, it's not a deal breaker for me. I prefer it's an easy fix. I just haven't really played with it. So just to give you both sides of it,
mate. Gearing. I think you said before you only changed 1 tooth or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. So on that last bike I built, I played around with the gearing. So one thing I wanted to do was obviously limit just weight, and I dropped sprocket sizes to reduce sprocket weight, which I mean it's minimal, but it all makes a difference, as well as the chain length, because you're dropping like 2 or 3 links. So that's how the gearing came about, and I come to that conclusion on the last bike I built, the gearing, which I liked. It's a 1242 on my last bike, I believe. I think stock's like 1450 or whatever nowadays. The other reason I played with the gearing is to get your wheelbase correct. Obviously you can shorten it as much as you want, but to get the prime length and keep your gearing correct is like a negotiation between, sometimes could be 5-6 mil, which is quite a lot. So that's why I ended up going to that specific gear ratio. I mean, if I had to, I would go bigger sprockets or whatever just to get that swing arm length shorter. The swing arm length dictates my sprockets overall, but I need to keep that ratio. And then at the same time, my gear ratio is very similar to stock as it was, but the torque ratio, torque setting or whatever is different, which does play into it. Don't know too much about that. There's calculators online, but it's just something to keep in mind that it does change it. But just through, working out the theory of it and then just testing it, it works. So it worked for me. So I just put that same setting back on this bike. And, that was the one thing I changed. It was a 1242, I believe, and I had designed the sprocket, accordingly. And then, obviously, it was just a bit too fast, I think it was. I was over jumping it, if I recall. So I just chucked the 43 on there and it was all tickety-boo.
Wow.
But I just haven't gone through the effort. It's just a rental sprocket. I haven't gone through the effort to redesign it.
So going from 12 to 43 now, you just said, how many links in your chain would that be less than a normal chain? Because I would never have even thought about losing links. Like straight away there, you're dropping weight that I hadn't really thought of.
Yeah.
Must be.
Now this, I mean, let's just say the same. Let's say the same actual wheelbase. So we're not talking about
true, because your wheelbase is shorter, so it's
yeah. Like, I mean, from the original chain length, it's heaps. It's a lot. So from the original swing arm length and gearing setting, it's quite a lot. But from, let's say I actually just had stock gearing on at the same length, off the top of my head, it'd probably be 2, maybe 3. It's a substantial amount, but it's substantial amount. Like, I think it's like 100 grams or something, 50 to 100 grams, which is a lot, especially when you're rotating,
that's it.
And then that also plays into your drive lane drag and whatnot. But now we're really nitpicking. But that's the way I like to be. Obviously, because of that, I had to redesign the chain guide. I had to make that a lot smaller to actually match the smaller sprocket, just so it actually worked.
Right.
But yeah, that's about
okay.
That. Yeah. And same with the front chain guide, I believe. I made that a lot smaller so it didn't have too much play.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's specific to that gear ratio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. The only other thing that I'm talking freestyle motocross specific, apart from the seat, but we've already spoken about the seat and all the holes in the fairings and everything that you could possibly grab onto.
Mm-hmm.
Grip tape. That's about the only other thing I can see that's special. You just got a bit of grip tape up the frame, and that's about it. So, have I missed anything?
I think freestyle specific, you've probably hit the nail on the head. Grip tape, and then that comes into those little 3D printed wings I put on there. I think that's about it. I mean, you're talking to someone that looks at it nearly every day, and it's kind of old news, so I don't see the detail anymore. Closely. I mean, apart from that, you've got just where the ignition stuff and CDI is all located. It's all tied in under where the tank would be. There's a whole bunch of little details which are quite cool, and maybe I'll make a video on it one day. Actually, I've had photos taken of it, so I'll upload them at some stage. But yeah, that's about it. I think we've covered pretty much everything.
That's what I thought. I've gone through and I thought, that's pretty much everything I could work out. Did it sound like I knew what I was talking about?
Yeah. No, it
No.
definitely did. At least to the degree where you put enough time in to have a good chat about it.
Yeah,
Um,
it
yeah.
does interest me a bit. Like I
Mm,
said,
mm,
I am the least mechanical person you're gonna get. I'm as lazy as it comes. I will pay a mechanic to do everything for my bike because I don't trust myself with it. Um, I like riding it. Yeah. I
mm,
don't spend
mm.
enough time to, like what you said, when you don't know about something, you kind of stop talking about it. And yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know enough about the mechanics that I'm not going to risk my life
No, and
fixing
that's
my,
just it.
you know,
Yeah.
I'll do most things, but I'm not going to go. I did rebuild my bike twice or three times, and I
Yeah.
felt so nervous every time I did it. I thought, nah, I'm giving up on this shit. I'll
Yeah.
rebuild.
Yeah.
I'll rebuild something that I'm not going to like fall 75 feet from. That's okay, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
No.
So
You've hit the nail on the head.
what I want to know is at the end of all of this, this is kind of the big question. You have basically answered it, but why do it? Why why go so deep into all of this? And this is already we've been here for a long time now talking about, and we haven't even scratched the surface of what you have actually done. Why
Yeah.
did you do it?
Why not? What else
Why
would I
not?
do? Um,
Yeah.
I just love it. Like I purely just a passion. I love engineering, and there was just combining two, and that was the final thing I think I had left to do in the sport.
Yeah.
Um, it was very weird when I finished it. It was this weight off my shoulders, like sweet, I'm done. I can leave this behind me now. Um, whether I do or not, it's a different story. But like that's the last thing I felt I had to do, just build that bike because it was. Yeah, I did want to do a triple flip, and I think this bike would do it very easy. But the funny thing is, um, when I knocked off, like part of the reason I did was actually because I was ready to knock off, and part of the reason was I really wanted to knuckle down and have this bike built, and I could not do the two. I could not
Nope.
continue to ride at the
No.
rate I could and design it. So part of me thought, yeah, okay, maybe I could come back and ride a comp or a best trick once the bike's done.
Mm-hmm.
Soon as I was done, I was like, man, I think I'm pretty well done. Maybe not, maybe, but at the moment, part of me wants to do a triple on it, just because, just to test it. I know it will do it very easy, and I think it would be able to be done in off a ramp which is sustainable, not jumping to the moon. Not saying that that's a bad thing, but I don't want to go to the moon. So that was the idea behind it. But whether I do it now or not, it's a different story. Maybe one morning I'll wake up and have a crack. But at the moment, I don't really feel like even gearing up to jump ramp. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that's it really. That's why. No real reason. Just kind of need to finish it off. Yeah,
Unfinished business.
yeah.
That's
Now
why.
it's done. I really love engineering and building bikes. Like I think that's where I am with it. Like originally, I wanted to build a lot of freestyle stuff and whatnot, and parts. But I think I'm probably going to steer away from that now and just build complete bikes. Whether I build more of these or not, I'm not sure. But just custom bikes. Maybe I've got a bike downstairs and I'm like, man, that would make a very nice flat tracker or a cafe racer. So that kind
Yeah.
of stuff I'm eyeing up. I've got a motocross design and I've just kind of started sketching, which is a little bit out there, which I'd like to build in the coming years. But yeah, I'm in no rush. I'm not really trying to just doing it as I please. Just having fun
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
For the triple flip, I wasn't going to ask you, but now that you said
Yeah.
it, with that bike, what ramp do you think you do need? What could
Um,
you envision yourself doing it off?
I think like the original Nitro Moon Buddha, so the one that Travis and Sheeny were jumping indoor at like the Aussie Nitro and
Yeah.
say in Aussie like 2016, I think.
Yeah.
Now this is something that I can say that's where I'd start. I don't know where I'd end up, whether you'd end up smaller or bigger. I actually built a ramp in 2018 for my old bike, which was practically the same size as the Moon Buddha, but it's like the non-American version. And what I think where I would start from, I never actually ever jumped. Obviously broke my ankle, and that kind of just stopped everything there. And then things change over time. So, to where it could get, I don't know. I think maybe you'd have to start there. I think is where I'd start. I think you'd get it. The reason I say that is I've ridden this bike a bit, and a double flips like. I've really got to take it easy, just double flipping 45 foot. So I'm talking dead stock 45 foot to a tall, like a high landing, which obviously adds to it, and no pop, so dead flat, and it just chills. Like I can stand up on the first rotation, stretch out as much as I can, and suck it back in to speed it back up. And then off 75 when I flip, I'd never planned to flip 75 again, and I've only done it to the airbag, and that's enough for me nowadays. But it just chills on it. Like the first time, I was so nervous to do it, but even just to the airbag, the first time I did it, I over-rotated. Not to the degree I fell off the back, but I had an extra, quite a few spare degrees in there. So
you might be a little blasé right now. You're only saying flipping, but you mean double flipping 75.
Yeah, double flipping. Yeah. Like if you just want to flip it, you just give it a bit more off the ramp and it spins. So yeah, like that's all I can gauge it on right now.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think it needs a young fella to ride it who's got some go in them still. Got the drive, which would be epic, and I would be happy for that to happen. But for that to happen, I need to redesign, get rid of the carbon fibre, and actually have, say, a titanium subframe with plastics.
That can handle the bashing over and over.
It's just not sustainable. It's very epic.
You'll be the chief mechanic only because you'll be making carbon fibre all day and all night.
I don't want to be
to keep somebody
carbon.
training in a foam pit or on an airbag, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, when I do that, but that's a big job in itself. The bodywork's very hard. That's actually one thing that a lot of people are saying is like, why do you use carbon fibre? It breaks easy and all that stuff. Is one thing to keep in mind when you're designing something for this kind of level is we're not talking bikes that are made for everybody. They're not made, like when you go to the shop and you buy your off the showroom floor bike, that's made for Joe Blogs to ride, 3 to 4 years on end and have multiple crashes. Whenever I built a bike or a part, all I ever wanted for that bike is to sustain itself pre-crash. It needs to be strong enough to perform. As soon as it is outside of its realm, if I crash, if I've done whatever, it can do it once. I don't care. If it sustains the crash, it's too strong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's it.
So it's too strong, which means it's too heavy. So that's one thing I get asked very often is, why do you use carbon fibre? Why this and why that? Partly because carbon fibre is very cool. And the other reason it's nice and light. Obviously, yes, it's a bit more dangerous and it's got no flex, but it is what it is. Yeah. Anyway, just thought I'd add that in there.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that, and because it's cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. What tricks are you able to do now that seem way too easy? And before you answer that question, the video I saw of you doing a ruler flip at a show, I'm going to assume that was way too easy. But is there anything else?
No, so that's the first thing you said. So like I said, I mean, I don't ride very much and I just muck around. And really, if I go ride, it's very odd, but I like doing whips and flips. I really enjoy double flipping. It's kind of funny. Just the feeling of spinning, and then I just play around in roller flips, but I don't enjoy them as much. So I can't really comment on too much, but anything where you're moving the bike, it's just silly easy. Like there's not a chance I would go into a roller flip like that this day and age with the amount I do ride, but it just does it. And the cool thing is, I'm still I'm hanging there and I'm like, right, I hold it. Okay, now get back on, because you overspun it, and you're like essentially just holding as long as you can to slow it back down. If I went to the next gen ramp and done it would be crazy, man. Because that's just off a normal 75 setup. But I don't ride enough at the moment to feel confident to do that. Nor do I really care to anymore. So
Man, that video that I saw, I mean, it's only a few videos back in your Instagram feed. But I mean, we're in 2021 right now, so if you're listening into the future, it's probably a long way back. Actually, no, probably not for you because you don't actually go on Insta that much.
It'll be 4 photos back in about 5 years, maybe. No, I'll probably upload some more of that stuff soon.
Yeah, but that ruler flip, if it was on the next gen, it probably would have been a double ruler flip.
Yeah,
you overcooked it, and you could see you could see in the video you were trying to hold it to slow it down, and you still overcooked the shit out of it.
Yeah. So it would be cool, and that's why I say, like, it'd be cool to see a young fella ride it to just see where it would go. And yeah, maybe that's something I'll work on in the future, is to get the plastics done, and they can at least ride my one, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
should be quite cool.
Now here's just a couple of finishing sort of questions. I know we've been here for a long time, and you're probably very over it. I'm sorry, but it is very interesting to listen to you.
If we're talking like other stuff, I'll probably get sick of it. But engineering I can talk about all day. So we're good. Keep it
Sweet. All right. Well, maybe everybody listening's probably already tuned out because it was just engineering only.
It's just you and me left.
Yeah, I'd say there'd probably only be a few riders who are actually really think about it and really listen would take their notes, I think. No, maybe not. I know there's definitely some engineers who listen to this, and that's how we got onto it in the first place a year ago. But anyway, I did an interview 2 months ago, actually, with Paul Everest from Unit, and he was talking about a couple of things with his new brand Thriller. And he said, can you just hold off a couple of months before you release it? Which I have. And I'm actually about to release it probably tomorrow. And in that chat that I had with him back then, I brought up the Skycraft bike that him and his brother built. And I probably did know the story way, way, way back when they did do it. And it was his brother Ian who designed it. And the reason Unit, or half the reason Unit even became Unit,
all of this,
was because of this bike design back in 2002 or something. And so, to remind me, it was $100,000 for him to build that bike. He had support.
I think 200,000, but
Oh, I think he even
he told me. Okay, well,
you're probably right.
What I hear. No, I don't know. No, sorry.
Probably right, especially in today's money.
I'm impressed.
I know, and I thought about that after he said it, and I'm like, that's actually incredibly cheap.
Yeah, especially if they didn't build it themselves. You know what I mean? Because that's the one way you save money on it.
Yeah, they had Red Bull, was it 888 Racing supercar team, and they had
carbon working.
They had designers from all around the world for all different parts, and I thought $100,000 is actually nothing.
No,
but anyway,
so
that was that part, and he did say it was light enough that you could pick it up with two hands. And at that point, I was like, yeah, but I've seen like Harry Bink or Kane Saul. They could pick up a 97 XR600 with two hands.
Yeah.
But obviously, it was incredibly light, like about 85 kilos. Or
I think it was in the 60s or 70s.
Maybe 70s.
What I read. Now, I don't know, but like I said, I spent a lot of time looking at stuff, and the Skycraft was one thing I got a lot of inspiration from. Because it was those dudes were ahead of their time, even just designing that. The idea, the thought of it was ahead of its time. So I was constantly looking at the concepts behind it. I looked at everything, man. You got to take in every other person's design and try and make your own from it. They've done an awesome job. I don't know too much more about it apart from that, though.
Right. Okay.
I did notice quite a few cheeky things in it. that's quite funny. Like,
What's
it's
that?
got just the frame goes over where the kickstart would be, and the exhaust is not timed up. But just certain little things. It's a concept bike, because I thought, man,
Yeah.
I'd love to ride that and see what it feels like. And then kind of the closer I looked, the more I realised had a bit more to go, but nothing to take that away from it.
Yeah. Would
Yeah.
you love to just give that thing a ride though? I don't.
The
As
Skycraft.
yes.
Yeah. Like I mean, like let's go a little bit more forward and put it onto it. Redo it for actual prototype. Yeah, I'd be keen. There's things like with that I noticed, like, but I think this is just coming from a rider that's designed it personal. Is the wheelbase is one thing, the fork angle is another, and even the tires alone is another. So looking at the rear tire on it, like let's say it was 65 kilos, they had I'm pretty sure it's a 120 Dunlop on the rear. So right there you could drop 1.2 kilos to 1100 grams, I think, just changing the tire. So
Wow.
little things like that. I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. Like that's the edge I can have with my bike. So just that experience there.
That's awesome. So you've
Yeah.
definitely studied that bike then, as well as all
for
these
sure.
other bikes.
Yep. Like I said, I spent a lot of time looking at. I'm actually got it right in front of me. Like I said earlier, Horst Leitner.
Yeah.
Probably going to pronounce it incorrectly. If you just put in his name and 125, the first Google image is a 125 with a 94 on it. That you'll see the similarities between that bike and what the concepts I've taken into this. Like designers like him. And then there's all sorts of other. I love looking at motocross bikes from the 80s. They're quite free. Like bikes haven't changed since the 90s. Barely anything, apart from the Yamaha, spinning their cylinder around. Everything's much the same. Yeah. They perform and they're a lot better, but they're much the same. So I like looking back at the old concepts, but from a new direction, and new technology.
And so a different purpose as well.
Correct. And so I'd looked at everything, anybody from the KTMs, Yamahas, everything. Like just look at any little thing and try and see where the edge was and why they'd do stuff, and then you'd kind of add it in. So you'd add the freestyle spin on it from there.
Yeah. Well, I only brought that up because it was also so interesting that Paul and Ian at Unit supported you for however long. Maybe it was 5-10 years.
It was a very long time, and from the early days too. I think maybe 15, maybe 14 or 15.
Yeah, and I thought, how crazy is that you were with them for so long, and they designed that bike, and here you are 20 years or almost 20 years later.
Yeah.
You're the new driving force of something. Yeah, like Ian was so far ahead of everybody else at that time.
You don't even realize at the time, but looking back, you're like, Freestyle only just started, and this dude's already designed an epic bike for it. Yeah. So I mean, like I said, I spent plenty of time looking at all of this stuff and trying to understand why, just get into the head of who designed it to understand why and what its purpose is and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, Paul did say he'd be pumped to jump on a call and have a chat to you about whatever you're doing. So
likewise.
Yeah, I've already spoke to him, so he said he'd love to get on and have a chat.
I have a lot of respect for Paul and Ian and how they supported me over the years. They're very good mates, and I mean I haven't spoken to either one of them in quite a long time. But when we're in the circuit, spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah, no, they were ahead of the game, and I think all of us actually have a lot to. Yeah, we owe them quite a lot. They've done so much. Yeah. So getting back to more normal. Well, I'm not even going to say normal people, but we've seen different riders taking ownership of some of your parts that you've made.
Yep.
Especially the most noticeable part, the swing arm. We already spoke about Harry Bink and Jo. They're the triple flippers, and they've taken on the swing arm. You've designed it for their bikes. Would that swing arm alone help them for the triple flip, or do they need more, do you think?
Yeah. So as I done this bike, I designed the other kit stuff, and that was the triple clamps as well. The triple clamps are a lot shorter. Um,
Mm-hmm. To fit a regular
pretty,
bike.
yeah.
This
So
is the difference.
it's the idea to just go and off the shelf buy it, and now you got freestyle parts. That was my goal with that, and that was halfway through designing this. I actually just done that for a little bit of fun, as well as because I didn't want to ride my other carbon bike that I built. I was too scared to break it. Ended up riding it in the end anyway, but so I just wanted to make a kit set bike off the shelf of what I could do, and from Swingarm triple clamps dampener, that alone was enough to give me the feel of what that the first carbon bike was that I built. Similar. So those were the biggest things. Like I tried to break it down. What's off the shelf, essentially off the shelf, and what can I do to make that feel? And it came pretty close to it. As soon as I changed the tires again, it was really close. So yeah, that's that. That's that. I mean, yeah, that is it.
Right. So if somebody's looking for parts, are you open to pumping out a swing arm here or there, or
I
flip
have been.
levers or foot
I have
hooks?
been.
They're quite
Um,
consumable.
yeah, I have been, but I don't think I will continue to. I'd like to, but it's very time consuming for what goes in. Sorry, yeah, for what comes out of it. Purely just doing it for the love of it. Like there's no margin in it, obviously, because when you're doing one-off parts, they cost so much to get made. And
Exactly.
I don't really care to. I mean, I'm open to starting it as an aftermarket thing, but I'd need to team up with someone to do that. Just with where my interests lie, I really just like designing and being in the office building bikes, in the workshop building bikes. So, um, if someone was willing to work with me and do that, yeah, cool. I don't think I'm going to chase it. And yeah, I'm open to doing custom stuff, but I've done it the last couple of years and just odds and ends here and there, and it's been pretty cool, and the guys have loved it. But it's very time consuming to what I get out of it.
Yeah.
So and that's kind of where I've started to make my mind up was like I really just prefer making the bike itself, and there's more high end, more custom, more collector spec, So just one bike a year, I'll be pretty happy.
That's cool.
And also, I kind of like just doing different stuff. Like I'm doing a second freestyle bike now, and it's pretty boring, because I've already been there, done that. It's a lot easier than the first one, but kind of like the challenge of, it's different every time,
Mate,
Not saying I'm not going to build the same version over again, but I don't want to produce it.
Yeah. That sounds very similar to your answer when we did that last podcast, when we were talking about the retirement.
Yeah, it's
and you gave almost the exact same answer as to why you stopped riding freestyle competitions. Why would I want to go win the same trophies I've already got?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. Why go build another freestyle bike if it's going to be almost the same? You're already bored with it by the sounds of it.
I could, like I said, if I was competing, I would make it a lot better. Like, there's a lot of things as I was doing it, I was like, okay, certain things in that, like version 5 already, and then by the time you've built it, you've got like version 10 in your head, whether it's swing arm, wheels, frame, all sorts of little things. But yeah, like I said, that's fine tuning it, kind of done its dash. What's next? What can I do next? Something better and different. I kind of would, I wouldn't mind moving more into like a mainstream bike, like I said, with more, like a more motocross bike or whatever. Obviously, that's out of my realm of expertise with experience. Like designing a freestyle bike, yeah, okay, I'm probably pretty qualified for that. Designing a motocross bike, not so qualified. I really have to work with someone who's a top level rider to test and work out what works for that. But that's kind of where I see my next challenge.
Who you'd have to team up with a full-time racer then, I guess, if you're going to go down the motocross road.
For sure. I think like as far as the original design goes, I've got a concept that I think potentially is going to be epic. It'll be absolutely epic. It'll flop hard and it'll just be a cool concept. But yeah, so it's more suspension design. Anywho, I'd need to talk to a lot of riders, a lot of racers, and essentially just interview them and talk to them about what they like, their feel on the bike, how they like to respond, how they like, so you know what I mean? And then also you need to talk to bike mechanics and all sorts. It's a very deep rabbit hole to go down. And like I
Yeah.
said, like
See,
that's,
I think that brings its own difficulty, because at the moment you're building a bike on your
yeah,
expertise. You
yeah,
know exactly
yeah,
what you want, how you can build it with what materials you have at your
yeah,
disposal, or you've learnt the skills you needed to learn to be able to
mm,
build it. But then if you're now interviewing and asking other people, you're
yeah,
kind of at the same place as KTM factory or Kawasaki factory, or
for sure,
you
for
know,
sure, for sure,
only as a
definitely. I mean,
one-man band instead.
a lot lesser off. But I just like this stuff, so that would be the reason I do, and that's why I said it's a long term. Um, I would like to build this next concept at some stage in the next, 3 to 5 years probably. But who knows? Just keep going, and I may
Mate,
end up doing something else instead.
talk about lofty goals. Like, you don't fuck around, do you?
We're not here to muck around. No, we're
No,
not.
no, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Look, we've been on for a long time. If you want to wrap this up, we can. If not, there was just a couple of questions about the next gen ramp
yeah. No, let's
that I
just keep
did
going.
have.
We'll knock it all out.
Knock it all out, right? Well,
Yeah,
I've actually got a question here from old FMX Grizz, so I'll play that for you.
yep,
Actually, first question was about the ramp, and he texted that. As new riders that are riding freestyle on an 8 meter or a 9 meter radius or whatever American standard ramp, when would you say is the right time to make the change to the next gen ramp? Or should they start at the next gen ramp these days?
I don't think you should probably start there. I mean, you can. It's just a big
In
jump.
It's a big jump, but my reasoning behind jumping in on his question is, could you cut 1 meter off the top, so have a 2.5 meter ramp, and then when you're ready, then you bolt the top piece back on, if you know what I mean.
You for sure could. You for sure could. So off the top of my head, that ramp's 8.5 meter radius.
Hmm.
So by taking that meter off, you've nearly got your 9 meter. You've probably just got a nice jump anyway. So yes, it's probably a
That's
really
what
good
I'm
option.
thinking.
One thing you want to keep in mind is by doing that, I get way too picky and fussy with things, but like I've learned you don't ever put the last bit of sheet metal on at the top of the ramp, for the reason it kicks you. You want to
Yes.
have a nice long length. So that would be something I would keep in mind by putting a join there. You may interfere with the radius or the characteristics of that ramp enough that it might kick you a bit funny in the next gen formation. But I
Yep.
don't think it's to the degree where I'd worry about it. Just something I'll keep in mind. But
Yep.
yeah, I think it's probably a good idea and go for it. Um, one thing I one thing I will say about that ramp is when you're asking when do you think is a good stage to jump it, I think if you're a very confident rider, you've got a motocross background and you're pretty good at timing stuff and just feeling it, just jump it at any stage. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
what's the
It's a
difference?
jump. Yep.
Um, you know, flipping it for the first time will be a little bit fun for you because it flips very easy. And then you'll start having a lot of fun. But where I was going with that is when I built that ramp, I was jumping it on dirt and it was pretty hardcore. Obviously, I jumped on airbag first and done doubles on it on airbag first, but yeah, she was on dirt and it was scary, man. Like it was hardcore. I loved it, but I knew that would if I crashed it, it would not be fun. And sure enough, that's what happened. But the cool thing about it now is our landings. We don't have to do that. We don't need that. Like that. We're kind of over the hardcore days. Let's just all have fun, be safe, and ride the airbag landings are just as good. I think that's where that ramp will come into its own now. Like the Nitro boys are now running it on the airbag landing and they're having a really good time. So I'm pretty stoked that that's happened. I think that's just what that ramp needed, but we didn't have the landings at that stage for it.
Yeah, the technology hadn't caught
Yeah,
up yet.
yeah. Like I said, I had not planned to jump that ramp again since I'd kind of knocked off. But then I was just looking at my airbag and that, and I was like, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
It's so much fun. So yeah, that's probably my answer to when. Is kind of up to you, but yeah, just keep that in mind.
You did mention Nitro. I was actually going to say about them because guys like Jake May, he's got pretty much every ramp that's ever been designed at his compound, which is pretty fucking awesome to see, to be honest. And a few other riders have started building them. We had two of them at Night of the Jumps, and we put them at Red Bull Dirt Diggers in 2019, and watching the guys hit it looked unbelievable. But nobody else has really used it since. But then, did you watch Adam Jones's testing videos on YouTube when they tested the ramps for the new Nitro tour that they're on right now?
I've seen a couple of clips, but I should actually have a watch.
You should watch it. I think there was 2 or 3 videos he did, and they're like 20 minutes each. And it was the testing day where they brought the airbag, I think, to Jared McNeil's house.
Yep.
And the funny thing with the airbag was the regular ramp onto the regular sized airbag. You know, they kind of, Bo Bamberg, who just had a fucking huge crash yesterday or the day before or a couple of days ago.
Oh, shoot.
On, I think he was on the Moon Booter, landed normal from a ruler flip and then just got bucked. Bounced down and broken his collarbone, so he's pretty pissed. But in Adam Jones's testing video, he just jumped normal and over jumped, gave it gas because he was over jumping, but as soon as he landed on the end of the airbag, he just went into like this full
loop out,
sky wheelie Larry loop out thing, and he 5 meters from the end of the landing on his ass.
I've seen people do that. I haven't seen that, but yeah.
Yeah, and this is Bamberg. Like, this is a dude who knows how to ride a bike. Like, he's got some fucking skills. But anyway, the rest of the riders were jumping it, and you could see them jumping, and it was fine. But they get like a little bit of airbag wobbles at the bottom and whatever.
Yeah.
And they said when they lifted up the airbag and brought in the next gen, Adam, I think it was Adam in the video, said that feels 10 times better or something like that. He's like, that ramp with that landing, he's like, that was perfect.
It's made for freestyle.
and I was, because that's exactly what we've been planning on doing at Night of the Jumps, is to have that kind of flexibility, and that angle. And I was like, okay, I think in my mind, I could think the next gen would do that onto that angle. And I'm so glad that they've done the testing and it worked like that.
Yeah, so now we can all utilize that.
Yeah, like they've done the hard work and it worked.
Yeah, and a lot of that is chasing, so the idea of that ramp is you've got a certain amount of float time in the air. Let's say you jump 200 feet on a flat takeoff, you can have a little bit of float there in the center of your jump, I guess. Or what everyone calls hang time. On like a regular 75, there's not a lot. There's not much pop, and it is what it is. I started making wedges for 9-meter ramps at 300 mil. If anyone wants to do that, it works amazing. That's the best. I won't touch one otherwise. Awesome for whips and flips. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's the closest it's a stepping stone to the next gen ramp. That's something, if you're out there jumping, you want a bit of pop and you don't really want to build or invest in a next gen ramp right now, or, it's easier for you to jack it up. Just build a 300 millimeter wedge and prop your 9-meter up. Jump it maybe at about 73 to 74 feet. It just sits a bit nicer, but that's up to you, Anyway, where I was going with that is that's where that 9-meter was, the next gen ramp, why it was designed is just to try to get that BMX feel, get that pop, that float. Yeah. And it's your takeoff angles, your landing angles, and I don't know, all the rest of it. I spent a very long time, I'd hate to think how many ramps I designed at that stage. but yeah, ended up building that, and it seems to work. Also, I will note, when I do jump, I jump at 73 feet to the knuckle. I always measure to the knuckle.
Good.
So now this is coming from someone that used to like jumping 79 to 80 feet back in the day, and then I worked out, I'm chasing the wrong end of this. I need to go shorter and steeper for that hang time. So yeah, that works for me. I think the Nitro boys might be 71 or 72 feet for their setup, and it's just, there's no rules, man. Just do what works. It's pretty cool, yeah. And and for everyone that's wondering, heaps of people hit me up for the double flips. I don't jack it up or anything. She just flat on the ground, because that's how that's the reason why I wanted the ramps that way, is because no more jacking up. Just get it level and ride it.
Stick the ramp on the ground.
Yep.
Just
bolt it down and be done with it. Yeah. So it's sort of something to keep in mind.
Yeah, exactly. Did you see not too long ago on Instagram, Kyle DeMello, the front flip?
Nah, like I live in my own world. I don't know what's happening these days.
I assume so.
Stuff. Yeah.
I assume so. That's why I thought I'd spell it out, because I knew you wouldn't have seen it. Anyway,
it sparks a thought. I'll mention it after this. Actually, sorry. Continue.
Did well. This front flip that I just saw is on a regular ramp.
Yeah.
It doesn't say anything in the comments, but as I look at the video, I would say that was the next gen ramp. It looks like a very tall ramp compared to him on the run up.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if I'm not mistaken, that's a fronty, what he says is first go, first attempt, and he pulls it around sweet.
Do they front flip a snow bike? I'm just having a look right now. I'm just dusting off my Instagram. It's big, man. Yeah, I couldn't say. It does look like I don't know in that world.
I know.
But good on him, man. It's huge. That where I was going to go with this earlier is one of my favourite things I've seen done, and especially off that ramp, was Thomas Padge's front flip, the next gen at Sydney X Games. And man, it was just sick. It was sick. I rated it, man. So that kind of stuff is cool. And that was at the era of those mechanical ramps, and then he went and done it off that, and I was like, man, respect. And I know how big that ramp is, how scary that is. But that reminded me of it when you mentioned it, actually. That's what I bring that up.
You said before you don't really do much else other than whips and rotations.
Yep.
Front flips are rotation.
Yeah, I've thought about it, I've thought about it. I do want to do a front flip. So as I said, where I left in 2018, before I broke my ankle, I built that triple flip ramp, and I started learning fronties on my mountain bike to obviously take to a dirt bike, because that's where I wanted to go. Everything changes over those times and stuff. And the funniest thing is, I've been sitting here for the last 2 weeks, contemplating if I hang my boots up completely, as I'll always go and ride motocross, don't get me wrong. But what I mean from freestyle is like, or do I go have a little bit more fun with it? Maybe go ride a certain tour that's coming to New Zealand next year, or not. I'm not sure. I'm just working out. Do I like the idea more than I like the action? Part of me is like, I really want to go ride the foam pit, just to have a play, and then that might spark it. And where I was saying is, I'm mucking around with some flexible composites and stuff, pretty much for that reason, because when I start doing that, it's a different story. To answer your front flip thing, I consider it. Do I like the idea of stuff more than the action? Sometimes, probably. They were talking about the tour, and I was like, sweet, give me a weekend, I'll go for a ride and see how I feel. And then my bike was in pieces. In pieces. The rear end was off because I changed the gearing. And I looked at it, and I looked at my gear bag, and I was like, I'm just going to load up the Jennies and ramp stuff and go watch the boys ride, and just go help out. And that's what I did. And I was happy as. So, I don't have that in me, I don't think, anymore. But every now and then you wake up, you're like, I want to go, I'm just going to do some flips or something, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, to answer the front flip thing, maybe not.
Yeah.
Who knows?
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's it. Well, the funny thing was, remember after we did that last episode, I was sitting there with my wife's she's got a Samsung Note phone, and I
Yep.
just sketched out your ramp plans, and it actually looks kind of funny, and I put it on that T-shirt and I showed you, and you're like, oh yeah, sweet, go for it.
Yeah.
I finally wore that shirt for the first time. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we had our first event, and I turned up there at night of the jumps, and Remy Bizois, he was there for Team France,
Yeah.
and he saw the shirt from a fair way away, and he could see Next Generation was written on there, and he got up closer. He's like, "Hey," and I'm going to do the worst French accent. Is this the real dimensions? I'm like, yeah, that's it.
That's
And
so
he's taken a photo just up close of the shirt to get the dimensions of it. He's like, no, it's not the real dimension. I'm like, well, why would I put it on if it wasn't? And
just send in the real plan, man.
yeah, I was like, mate, I actually put the plans on the Riders Lounge podcast.com site. Like, they're up there.
Yeah, cool.
You can look at the
link
PDF. You don't have to
have
to look at the shirt. But I just thought how good that was that he was so interested in knowing. And he's actually badgered me from your last episode. You said about having a 9 meter jacked up 300 mils. He's like, oh, have you got the ramp plans for that yet? And I'm like, oh, I don't think there's any plans. I think it's just 300 mil.
300 mil, yeah.
Yeah, just
you can do it however you want.
Yeah, but I think it was just so interesting to me that he was doing his research, put it that way.
Yeah.
And quite
a lot of people have. A lot of people, like I've had a lot of messages from people about certain things and go back and forth about whatever it might be ramps or bike stuff, or they might show me, hey man, I've seen what you're doing, that's cool. Or one thing I will say is I've always run one radiator on my bike, and a few people have said, hey man, look, I'm doing one radiator too now, cool. Keep in mind, if you do it, you need to monitor your temps. I use
seems very basic, but
yeah. So actually, with Freestyle, it doesn't run hot enough with 2, but 1 it does prime actually, depending on where you are. I will just say I use engine ice, which runs about 10 degrees cooler. So put that in; it'll help you through it. The last thing I want someone to see is your bike. And I just use a basic. This is not the most accurate. Sometimes I use the infrared or whatever, the heat gun, just to keep an eye on it when I'm maybe somewhere hot or whatever. I used to be somewhere hot. I just use like the Pro Circuit temp stickers on the cylinders to monitor it, make sure it doesn't go over 100.
Oh yeah.
But I like, so when people message me that, I pass that on. But I just thought I'd say that in case everyone's listening and wanted to or did do that. It's not willy nilly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a fair call.
Yeah, I will. If you've linked up those ramp photos, maybe I'll put them in my description. I'll just put a link to it, to the Riders Lounge podcast, where they can download it. 'Cause a lot of people hit me up and I just send them through, but obviously that'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, no, I've put them up, and actually I'm in the process of gathering plans from other places as well. Because
I'll send you everything I've got then in that case. I don't have a lot, but I've got a few.
Well, I think you've sent me through your 45-foot your design.
Yeah, I've got a regular 45-foot too. Yeah.
Well,
so I'll just pass.
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great. So, actually, you remember the guys from Fly Group?
Yep.
They used to run X Fighters there in Spain.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, they
would have. Forget.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They just sent through the Super Kicker, so the regular 45 plans. They sent through a regular 9 and the front flip, because I asked them also for the rocker for the cheetah ramp.
Yeah.
Because we use that one at Night of the Jumps purely because they built it off of a perfect 9-meter radius ramp.
Yep.
And so they're using that ramp, and then they've got this rocket that fits it. And I've jumped that ramp, and I think it was the smoothest 9 I've ever jumped. I don't know why. I just loved it. Maybe it was the landing and the combo. But anyway.
Sometimes you get them and they work, man. And
yeah.
It can be to the degree of the box. Like, this is me going way too hardcore as I normally do, but like, the way the box section is and the thickness of the walls versus, the actual size of it makes a huge difference. Like, one of the issues I have with American ramps is they use like rectangle box, but in the radius they put it the thin way, and it just has so much flex, and they all end up cracking. This is generalization like at its biggest, but random little things like that make the biggest difference in ramps and how they feel.
Yeah. That's it. No. That's exactly what when we had this chat, like I said, last year, and we were talking about the ramps, and I have joined a few Facebook groups, and it feels like I've stepped back 20 years to like FMX Australia days and Freestyle
I miss
MTX.
Those days, man. They were cool.
And I'm seeing the same questions come up on these Facebook groups of, hey, who's got ramp plans? And I see the same 20-year-old shitty ramp plans getting thrown around.
Yep.
And this is where I've kind of been thinking the last couple of months, just to try and gather the right pieces, get the right plans and put them in one place and say, this is actually what we use at every event. If you go to Australia, you'll see them. If you go to America, you'll see this. If you go to Europe, this is what everybody uses. Stop building pieces of shit, or maybe not pieces of shit, but don't stop building old stuff. Like, I keep seeing the old 9.1 meter radius Brooksy's first ever ramp that he built in like 2000. Like,
and a great
going
for
around
85 feet.
It was awesome for what it was, but it's not what you see now.
Yeah, that's right.
So I thought, all right, I'm just going to put everything in one place. That's what I'm doing. Yeah. So
my take on it, like right now going forward, I think regular, say, 9 meter or the American version of that ramps are obsolete at the best. What I mean by that is, I think all of them, once you've jumped it with that 300 millimeter wedge, it is amazing. And it's not like just as far as that world goes. And then if you want to go a bit more hardcore, sweet, go to the next gen ramp, but hey, I'd probably really suggest an airbag there. That's where I'm at with that. Like, I'm a bit of a princess when it comes to riding nowadays. Like, I don't need to, so I only ride the best days on the best ramps, So, I wouldn't touch a 9 meter without it. There's not a chance. It's too much hard work, You're like, you're trying to do the trick and you're rushing and doing all of that, and you put a bit of like loft in it. You'll be nervous the first time you jump it, but after that, it's so awesome. Stiffen up your suspension a little bit. Make sure, like, I really, one thing I do like, especially when you start getting popular ramps, is a stiff front end.
So 300 mil is
12 inches.
Yeah, that's a good amount of pop to.
Yeah, I would go 400.
Any ramp.
I would go. I have jacked up the 300 mil wedge ramp. But like, as I do this, I go forward. So 300 mil wedge, 73 feet is pretty nice. Depending if you've got a tailwind, 75 all day long, but and then there's times we've jacked it up by like 100 mil unintentionally because we've ridden uneven surfaces, and man, it was cool. I love it. Now, talking to someone like this is talking from my perspective and my riding experience. So, I'm a guy that kind of done flips, whips, and those kind of tricks. That was my area, Whereas you talk to someone who does varials and fronties, they're going to tell you something different, and it will be probably different to what I say, and for very good reason. So I don't think there's one thing that suits everything.
That's it.
So you got to remember, I'm speaking from my experience and my style of riding. I think like from what I remember, the bodywork guys might like flatter ramps, but that might not be to all of the dudes, you know. And I think Jacko prefers a flatter ramp for his fronties, but don't quote me on it. This is just from what I can remember of our conversations back in the days. You know, so we're always going to have multiple ramps.
That's it.
Just prop them up, man. You're going to have heaps of fun.
Yeah, that's it. That was the thing that I kept finding all the way along is, it was just all these different ones popping up, and I'm like, mate, we've moved on from what I was seeing on these groups, which that's not a mistake by anybody. It's what's out there, and it's freely
Just
available. And, and I was like, oh man, I'd rather that everybody kind of knew what is actually being used rather than not having any idea at all. And that's where you kind of run into mistakes all the time is if you don't know what you're building, or if you don't know why you have a rectangle and they've got it the wrong way around. Those kind of things. So
one thing I will say as well, just while we're talking about the ramps, is it's a little bit more hardcore, I guess, if you want to say it that way or whatever, when you do prop them up, or they're steeper and you're going higher. Yes, you go a little bit shorter, but what I found is I feel safer riding a bigger jump, a bigger loftier jump, like let's say next gen, and doing a trick like really sending a trick out, than I do on a ramp that, okay, it feels a bit safer to jump by itself, but they're a little bit more dangerous to do big tricks on.
Yeah, because you don't have the time.
You're rushing, and you know, like you watch the guys that can do big roller flips, like Sheeny or Javier would send them, or you know,
Ryan Brown or someone like that.
Yeah, all those boys. They could send them on all sorts of ramps, but they would do it, and they did it on the flat one, but just be scratching it in. Versus when they do it on a loftier ramp, they'd bring it back and be happy as, you know.
Yeah.
Just something to keep in mind, obviously. But yeah.
Yeah, that's it, mate. I think we've covered more than enough ground today. Tonight here, it's almost midnight, so I think if this isn't enough info for the engineers and the dedicated riders, I don't know what is. It was very specific chat tonight, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, me too. It's actually quite fun. It's quite cool. Like it's very interesting because I've done 2 years of building and designing, and was what it was, and had it done. And by the time I'd finished, I was going to finish and sweet as. And you know, when I was doing it, I talked to people around me about it. Obviously, I don't want too many people to know. And it was very like, you know, that was, I kind of lost that conversation. Like I haven't even really talked about it since. So, you know, where I was going is I quite enjoyed it. It was quite fun.
Awesome.
It's brought me back because it feels like so long ago that I was designing it. You know, I'm like, oh shoot, that's right. I actually, you know, this and this and this and this. So no, it's quite cool. Yeah, cool. Easy as. We'll get a few things. Yeah, cheers for the chat. I appreciate it. I'll put those ramp plans. I'll link that on my Instagram as well. Just because everyone's been asking me, and I'm like, yeah, I've got to do it some stage, and never have uploaded them. I just send them individually every time. So that'd be cool if people can have that stuff. And yeah, if you ever got any questions about anything, feel free to ask me.
Absolute legend. Thank you so much for taking so much time out of your day. I really appreciate it, and I hope everybody listening to this also does as well. I'm sure they will. So, mate.
Cheers for the chat, Steve. It's been bloody good.
Can't wait. Yeah, can't wait to catch up again another time whenever we're allowed to travel and see each other at some potential event. Who may know what could happen in the future with you. Or I might just come down to New Zealand for a holiday.
They've probably got more chance of seeing me here.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. No worries. Thanks very much, mate. And we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Cheers, Steve. Talk later.
All right. To all of you who have stuck around for the full podcast, I really hope you found that as interesting as I did. And if you're a mechanic, an engineer, or a new young rider looking to just send it in freestyle motocross, you probably found this even more exciting. I think you'll probably find you'll need to listen to this one again, just like I had to. There is so much going on with this bike. I needed to go back and double check what Levi even said to make sure I wasn't dreaming. What I would like to know though is what parts of this new bike did you get most excited about? Or were there some aspects of the bike that maybe Levi didn't explain and you wanted to hear a little bit more on? For me personally, simply just looking at the bike, it's a marvel of engineering. Basically breaking the mold of what would be acceptable in bike design and moving parts all around just to achieve mass centralisation, no matter what was in the way. If you have any questions after listening to this one, please don't hesitate to shoot them through to me at steve@invertmanagement.com, or if you're lucky, Levi might catch your message on Instagram. But as you heard throughout here, he's not on social media too much. But I'm sure that if there's a good enough question and he's on there at the right time, he'll hopefully catch it and reply as well. If you listen to this as an audio podcast only, which is completely normal and pretty much the only way we've done this since the very start, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to watch this as a video, which might have some walk around video, maybe some still images zoomed in to where we're talking about different parts, hopefully by the time you've listened to this, I have made a video. And if I did, it will be on recast.app. And I'll put a link directly in the show notes and on the ridersloungepodcast.com website, so you won't be able to miss it. And one thing that we did speak about in this episode as well, I have uploaded Levi's ramp plans on ridersloungepodcast.com website. A whole bunch of new ramp plans are up there now, and I will continue to add plans for other ramps that are in constant use around the world, and any other riders that may be working on some and are happy for me to put them up and make them publicly available. And I really do believe in sharing this kind of knowledge freely. Some guys, they try and keep it a secret, but I think it's great to have access for everybody to build the right ramps. And that's exactly what Levi has done with the next generation ramp, like we spoke about in this episode. Also, the new 9-meter ramp, which, well, it doesn't sound like it's too much different to the old 9-meter radius ramp, but I can assure you there is a big difference. And I have to thank Fly Group for sending those plans over, because actually the plans for the 9-meter ramp are also... The 9-meter ramp is the basis for the front flip ramp, or the cheetah ramp, or the front flip rocker, whatever you want to call it. It's actually based on that 9-meter ramp by Fly Group. So you can build yourself a 9-meter standard radius ramp, and if later on down the track you want to turn that into a front flip ramp, you can just use the exact same ramp plans, and the front flip rocker is designed specifically for it. Double flip super kicker ramp plans are also up there from Fly, which were used at X Fighters. We use them at Night of the Jumps. They're at X Games. Plus the 8-meter ramp, which is used throughout Europe, which is a bit poppier than the 9, and you'll see that at the World Championships as well. There's plenty more coming. Quarter pipes, moon booters. Keep your eyes peeled on the ridersloungepodcast.com. And speaking of ramp plans on our website, you can also find the next gen ramp plans as a blueprint t-shirt design. And I think what would even be more beneficial than that is actually having the wall canvas of the blueprints. And they are real measurements. If you go on there, check it out. They are the real measurements for the wall canvas. And it's definitely a better way to just make your bike garage and the shed where you're welding up your ramps, just to make it look that little bit better. And while you're in there building those ramps, why not grab yourself a box of Rothaus, Tannen, Zepfler alcohol-free beers? You'll definitely need to quench your thirst as you're cutting and welding all of that 40mm by 40mm box section steel while you're out in the shed. And if after all of this, you're still wondering why Levi has retired from freestyle motocross when he's clearly still killing it, you can tune in to the first interview we did last year where he explains it all. Thank you very much for tuning in to this episode, and see you next time on the Riders Lounge podcast.